the sidelines. Has a man wide open. It's tipped. It's picked off. MJ Devonshire. Got space. He's going to take it to the end zone. Pittsburgh takes the lead.
He loves those moments. It reminds me of last year in the Garden against St. John's. And guys just stepped up. Blake hits a what the hell 3. You know, we're like, what are you doing? And he's done that all year.
Klicka out to Bizzario. It's over! The Pitt Panthers have upset Wisconsin.
Anybody if he hits his field goal. Up and got it! Sauls does it again!
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Simplify. It's been a while, but as always, I'm your host, Zach Kaminsky. I'm joined by my two wonderful, beautiful, quirked-up co-hosts, Kent Vanderwood and Mason Kling. We'll start with Kent tonight. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Zach. Pitt's offseason has ended, and so has ours. I'm excited to be back. Let's get the season rolling.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Mason, how you feeling?
A lot of the same. I got a belly full of chicken wings. I too am doing my preseason conditioning, getting ready for the fall. So feeling good, ready to rock and roll.
We're gonna need to get some beer in there. I mean, listen, we're building up. We're not going full contact day one, but our regiment's getting there.
Yeah, we're going uppers. Uppers is just chicken wings. Full contact is wings and beer.
I like that. All right. So, like Kent mentioned, the offseason is over. Training camp did start today. We're not press members. We don't have access. We don't actually live in Pittsburgh. So we don't have any news to report, except that it started today, and that's exciting. You're going to get hype videos every day from the official PITT account, and we're going to be scouring them for any sort of tidbits that we can have a take on. I don't think I've had anything yet. I don't think I've seen anything yet.
Jarvis, enhance. It's that season.
Yeah, it's Jarvis enhance season. So we're going to be previewing the whole ACC today. We'll be making our picks for conference championship, or the winner and the runner-up. But first, we got some other news to take care of. First, on the recruiting trail, since the last time we had an episode out, Pitt has got 2 new commits announced. Yassine Willis, the 4-star running back out of New Jersey. He, per Rivals, he's a top 200 player nationally and the number 1 player in the state. Very exciting. I think Pitt's doing a lot of 2 running back recruiting now. They are making up for a couple of classes where their running backs didn't work out. If you'll remember one example, 2021's commit, Jordan Bailey, ended up not even attending Pitt because of academic issues. And now these last 2 classes, they've brought in 2 running backs each, so that they can build those numbers up. Part of me wonders if this 2 running back thing as well is getting guys to the NFL with less wear on their legs. I don't know. It's sort of a thought I had with nothing to back it up in facts.
Is that with all the NFL running back controversy that's going on, is that seeping into your brain a little bit there? It makes sense.
Yeah. The other one, the big news is Pitt finally got his quarterback commit. That is Julian Duggar, the 3-star quarterback from Penn Hills, notably left-handed. So I want to really talk about Duggar, right? Because for the longest time, it seemed that Pitt's recruiting strategy was to get Trevor Jackson, the 4-star from Florida, or bust. But I believe it was a month or maybe 2 months ago, Duggar comes and throws in person for a Pitt passing camp. He lights it up. Signetti really likes what he sees. And they sort of restart talking to him because Duggar, I believe, got offered as early as his sophomore year by Pitt. But they offered him as an athlete rather than a quarterback. And then they sort of backed off him because they were pursuing other quarterback targets on the market. But after his showing at that passing camp, they really started that relationship up again. And now he's the quarterback for the 24 class. And personally, I've watched his highlights. He's really big. He's like 6'3", 205. He's got, from what I saw, like the thing that jumps out, obviously every player looks like a 5-star on their highlight tape, but the balls he throws they're just put in spots where nobody else can get them besides his wide receiver. And even if his mechanics are funky or, he's got to learn some stuff, obviously he's only like 17 years old, Pitt has a current quarterback room that lets him sit on the bench for a couple of years and learn a lot because there's no pressure on him to start as a freshman,
We posted the clip to the Twitter account, obviously, but having your quarterback be able to windmill dunk too is, not a bad thing.
Yeah. I know that, like, to that credit, right? Like Chris Peak, the reporter for the Pitt Rivals site, you probably know him. One of his things is that, like, if he doesn't work out as quarterback, he can probably play a lot of other positions just because, like Mason said, he's a freak athlete. He can windmill dunk. He can go for an alley-oop. You got to think that Jeff Capel wants him to be a two-sport athlete, all that kind of stuff. But
wasn't Capel at like one of his games to recruit his teammate or something like that?
I don't know. I mean, it would make sense. If you got a kid at Pine Richland, you're going to want to get him to Pitt. But to go off that, right, the other thing I don't think is being talked enough about is, like, this is a guy who it's very clear Pitt was the school he wanted to go to. Like, when he started talking to the Pitt coaches again, he got that Pitt offer. Like, he's like, yeah, that's my dream school. In the era of the transfer portal and guys moving around all the time, when you have a local kid that's like, I got the offer and a chance from my dream school that I grew up rooting for, that is an underrated fact when you're talking about roster churn and like, when it sort of safeguards you for the future when you're not having to roll the dice on a transfer quarterback that might not have performed at his previous stop.
Yeah, very true. I mean, Pittsburgh had, like, just from being there for a couple years, you can tell it means more to those kids. And anytime, like, even the players like Kenny Pickett that come to Pittsburgh, like, he wanted to stay. Like, people having the hometown kid, huge dub, huge win.
There's something in the water there, and it might be lead. All right, that's the good news. I'm very, very excited about these two players. Yacine Willis he's like a big bruising back. Julian Duggar is like wild for me to say this. A mobile quarterback who's going to be attending the University of Pittsburgh. Unthinkable for the last part of a half decade. Unfortunately, there is bad news. The 4-star wide receiver, Rick Darius Day Farmer, has flipped to UCF, and I'd like to use my platform at this time to officially call for a jihad against Gus Malzahn. He is stealing our recruits. He must be stopped. And I don't know. I'm mad.
What he giveth, he taketh. So, I mean, would have been a huge get to an already strong and just got stronger class. Tough. They were probably going at him pretty hard, being their hometown kid.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it goes sometimes. But
yeah, he was a really early recruit, so you never know if you're really going to hang on to those guys. Like I know somebody who ran the numbers just on quarterbacks, right? But guys who commit super early are super likely to flip if they're towards the top of their position rankings. So it's something you kind of like, you always have in the back of your mind, like, is this kid really going to stay committed for the better part of like a year and a half? And I did see some stuff like from UCF accounts floating around, like on the UCF side, like on their insider websites, they had been expecting this for upwards of a month. So I'm just kind of shocked that nobody in the Pitt media zone really had any. I didn't see any reporting that he was like likely to flip to UCF, but whatever. It happens. It sucks. And once again, the jihad is on for Gus Malzahn. Watch your back.
Tough to lose a name like that.
Yeah, That almost hurts more than just his playing ability.
You just got to have guys on your team with names like that.
Who's been our big name guy? I mean, it was Shockey Jacques Louis was the name guy for quite some time. But do we have like a name guy? Like a good name guy?
Maurice French.
Now, do we even? I mean,
now current
name guy, like Bub Means maybe, but it's not like that's sort of your
Bub means business.
I was going to say Bub means business.
I think that's probably the best we got though, just off the top of my head for current stuff.
Yeah. So you know what? We're talking directly to the Pitt recruiting staff right now. You need some names. Not names like stars. You just need some names. There's some fun ones to say.
If you want an NIL deal, you got to have a brandable name.
Where did Dakotas Crawford go?
I think he transferred to Nebraska.
I thought he left Nebraska, or am I getting that wrong?
I thought it was Arkansas.
No, so he did transfer from Nebraska after his NIL deal with an HVAC company. He now plays for Louisiana Tech.
That's right. It was somewhere smaller.
Yeah, he transferred out to G5, which that's a shame because that's an all-time name. And you also have Kool-Aid McKinstry, but that's Kool-Aid McKinstry is cheating because he changed his name to that. It was his nickname, but I don't know. Okay. Last piece of news. I mean, do you guys have anything else on recruiting?
I'm good.
We're good? Okay. Conference realignment is once again happening. We'll start with the first news that's confirmed, the only news that is confirmed. Colorado is moving back to the Big 12 starting as of 2024. So the Big 12 now is at 13 teams moving forward, and the Pac-12 currently has 9 after losing USC and UCLA, and now officially Colorado. Now having the Pac-12 the Big 12 at 13, they are actually saying we're looking for a 14th team. The team that is rumored to be moving is Arizona, which I get it. They're a partner for Colorado, but that's not like a football brand. But either way, I'm not. What?
It's a basketball.
Yeah, it is basketball. Yeah.
Landscape in the conference.
They probably did pretty well in the tournament last year.
Yeah, they probably went really far.
Sorry, it was right there, Ken. I had to. Yeah, but I feel like the conferences do think about all that kind of stuff when they are thinking about realignment. We definitely have that football bias, but Arizona's I feel like a huge market because them and ASU, and I don't really think there's as many diehard Arizona State fans as you get. You basically get that whole state and surrounding almost.
So, two things. One, the basketball thing. I think that's honestly a line of thinking that's unique to the Big 12. A lot of conferences will be like, yeah, football makes an absurdly large percent of all the TV money you're getting. So it does. It's not just bias. It does play a oversized role in realignment. But as far as Arizona goes, actually, their market in the States is sort of smaller than you think because Arizona, a lot of people are transplants from other states. So it's not a lot of Arizona and Arizona State grads. A lot of people who go to those schools are from out of state as well. They don't end up staying there. And that's one of the reasons actually they have trouble with recruiting the state. USC and Texas come in there and get their best players because there's no Arizona legacy in that state. But I don't know. I'm not a fan of these new conferences that are showing up. There's no sense of having history or a sense of being a part of the country anymore. USC and UCLA obviously kick this off, and it even goes back farther to Rutgers and Maryland joining the Big Ten. But like when Arizona leaves, there's a chance they're just not going to play Arizona State every year, which fucking sucks. Like you just lose rivalry games, and that's my biggest issue with it.
Yeah, it's Arizona in the Big 12 just feels weird. Colorado makes sense.
Like they were in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Arizona, like they're a legacy. I think they were honestly go back to the Pac-8, but I don't know. Anyway, more disheartening news for fans of rivalry games. Oregon, Washington, and Florida State are all rumored to the Big Ten. They were rumored, but nothing happened, obviously. Jack Mack, your scoops suck. But realistically, the Pac-12 is going to die before 2024. I don't think that these 9 schools are going to hang on because, if you're at 9, who are you going to call up? Are you calling up San Diego State? Calling up Boise? Calling up Wyoming? You're not going to stay together as a conference, so that leaves like programs like Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State. They're probably not going to go anywhere good. They're probably going to Stanford could go independent. That's different. But like Oregon State, Washington State, probably moving down to the Mountain West. If I had to guess, if I had to give a prediction right now, so I don't know. It all sucks.
It's just going to go. We're a couple years away from 2 divisions.
Yeah, and it feels like everyone has that thought. Like, yeah, the march of the tide is moving towards 2 divisions, and I don't think that anyone who's a fan of any of these schools are really excited about these mega conferences. Like, we watch college football because it's college football, not because it's the NFL. Like, I don't want to watch the NFL on Saturdays. I want to watch college football on Saturdays.
It's the pageantry. It's the rivalry.
The rivalry. The greatest story ever played is what the ESPN tagline is.
Beautiful game.
Beautiful game.
It's Iowa versus Iowa State.
Did you see the news came out that
Pac-12 after dark.
I am gonna miss Pac-12 after dark. That I am sad about. Did you guys see the Iowa player that bet on the under for the Iowa State game?
It was their kicker, and they sent him out for a last-second field goal, and he missed it. So the under hit.
I think the under wouldn't have mattered. I think it was like 45, and the finals was 27-10.
I thought it was 27-17, and the over was 45 or 45.5.
Oh shit! Oh shit!
I'm pretty sure it was you hear people sports bet all the time, and it doesn't really affect the game. I'm pretty sure when I read it in passing earlier today, that's what it said, which is if it actually had an effect on the game, that's pretty crazy.
This was last year, right? All right. Well, it's not showing me the score. No, last year's game was 10-7. It couldn't have been last year's game.
I think it was 2021.
2021. Yeah, 27-17. And what is the over/under? Because you usually have that somewhere. Over/under was 45 on the dot. You were right.
So I got some. I'm going back and checking all my bet slips from Iowa State for the past 2 years to see if there's any. I might have to contact FanDuel and get some bonus money back.
The thing is, though, it was Iowa State who missed the field goal. It was not Iowa. So no collusion, no point shaving. Also, the Iowa State quarterback apparently was just funneling money to his parents to place $505 bets on Iowa State games, which is very funny. But also, you probably shouldn't do that. It's probably bad.
Very funny. Very funny.
I didn't read that whole story, honestly.
Yeah, the Iowa State quarterback Hunter Deckers, it came out to say that he put up $5,000 across a couple hundred bets. And it's you do the math, and it's that's $5 a bet. $10.
That's how you do it to not move the line, though. Like if somebody goes in and puts a $5,000 bet on, and you look at the like Vegas and those books will like realize if there's a reason to move the line. So, but I guess if you just do it in small enough increments, they don't pick up on it.
Well,
And
that's how that. Did you guys hear about the Alabama baseball gambling scandal from a couple months ago?
yeah,
The reason that guy got caught is one he showed the counter the text from the Alabama coach being like, I've got a good inside source on this, which one, that's very funny. But two, he gambled on the game from Cincinnati in a sport, college baseball, which gets a very low volume of bets. And he's just like, yeah, I'm just going to hammer $10,000 on this. And then they were like, hold on.
No, you're not.
No, you're not, yeah.
Actually, no.
We're talking about conference realignment.
Yeah, we got a little off track. That's
we
all
got
right.
a little off track. The last point I want to say, Florida State had this big spectacle today about they're announcing they're very unhappy in the ACC and that they're actively looking at moving into another conference. Still going to cost you $30 million a year to leave it early. So I'm of the mindset that they're not going to leave the conference early. I could be proven wrong, and I probably will. However, the way they went about doing it, they're saying, like, the revenue gap, we can't compete in football like this. We're going to start losing recruits. Maybe you should start winning the conference again, guys. Maybe you should actually start winning games.
Yeah, it's funny that they get like a little bit of preseason hype, and now all of a sudden,
yeah. I mean, like, it's really annoying to me. I really hope that, like, the notoriously awful ACC refs, I hope they really give them some special treatment on the way out, because the way this whole conference and like former players are like, it's not a matter of if they move, it's when. But they're still like, oh, we love the ACC, but we're really going to leave, and because we want more money and all this crap. And just, unfortunately, I'm going to say a lot of nice things about Florida State and about, I don't know, at the end of the episode, because I think they're a really good team. But we're also issuing a jihad on Florida State. I think after today, I'm going to be honest, I think a lot of teams have just circled Florida State on the schedule, just planned with something a little bit extra in that game. Oh, you're too good for us. We're gonna drag you down into the mud. Jihad
on UCF and Florida State. We might as well just get rid of the state.
we're doing the Bugs Bunny. We're taking a comically large saw and we are sending the state into the ocean. And we advise. I mean, listen, we're going to need some manpower. We're going to need to build the comically large saw. We're going to need people to man it and operate it. So we're calling on all of our followers and listeners. We're finally sinking Florida.
Just use a little bit more fossil fuels. It'll be underwater a couple years anyway.
Pretty much. All right, Kent's back.
Yeah.
Kent, do you have anything on Florida State?
No.
No thoughts.
Fuck them.
All right. Now with that, season preview time.
Let's go.
So last year we did every single conference in depth. This year we're not doing that. I had to write a lot of previews, and by the end of it, I was very burnt out. I'm not doing it again. So this year we're previewing the entire ACC. We're doing PITT in the same episode. We're giving our picks for the ACC conference winners. We will be doing another episode where we cover the teams we want to, the teams we think that are interesting. We'll be making picks on win totals, other conferences' champions, and sort of saying, oh, this team could be a dark horse. This team could win. But right now, it's just the ACC. And we're going to start at the bottom and then work our way up. So I've got the teams in 5 rough tiers. They are not ordered within the tier. They're just sort of all where I think they're going to finish in groups. And we'll start with Virginia. Virginia last year was 3-7, 1-6 in the conference, and their final 2 games against Coastal Carolina and Virginia Tech were canceled. Their head coach is Tony Elliott in his second season at the helm. Obviously the record, the final 2 games are canceled because of the tragic shooting that happened to their team. I don't want, obviously, terrible thing. However, this was easily the worst team in the ACC last year, all year. They needed a last-second field goal to beat Old Dominion. Now, all of the seniors on the team were granted an extra year of eligibility due to that tragedy at the end of the season, but, that's very nice. It's a very nice thing to do. Unfortunately, I think Virginia is so bad that it will not really help.
They belong in this tier. They belong in this tier. We're not very good. Did not get a lot better.
Yeah. They
will. I don't know. Could be an argument for a couple teams, but probably finishing last tier in the ACC if I had to guess.
Yeah, I would argue they might have gotten worse. We'll go through everything. Let's just go through. We're going to run through all the position groups. So quarterback, their quarterback Brennan Armstrong transferred out of the program to NC State last season. He ended up taking a huge step back as well. Now he was injured constantly. He was behind a horrible offensive line, and they're replacing him with a FCS starter from Monmouth, Tony Muskett. They have one other quarterback with experience, and it's going to be a true sophomore. He started 1 game against Notre Dame, and he's bad.
Tony Muskett's an awesome name for a quarterback, especially one who plays for the Cavaliers. So if we're talking names, this pod, they do have that going for them, if nothing else.
Yep. You know what? You're looking on the bright side, and I appreciate that because I wasn't.
Yeah.
Moving on to running back. Injured Brennan Armstrong was their leading rusher last year with 611 yards. Their leading returning rusher had 387. This is not good. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Moving to wide receivers, they lose 4 of their 6 top wide receivers by catches and yards. They lost all of their good wide receivers as well. So the fact that Tony Elliott's offense relies on star wide receivers is not really it's not looking good here. Offensive line, it's really bad. They have 17 career starts returning, and 3 of their transfers never started an FBS game. I don't expect that to get better. Defensive line actually does have players returning. They bring back their entire 2 deep. They were really good last year. I believe they had the former DC at Air Force, who's still there. He did a really good job with the defense for what he was given. As far as linebackers go, they lose their number 2, number 3, and number 13. They return their number 2, number 3, and number 13 tacklers. They lose their number 1, who had 40 more tacklers than any other, the only player over 100, who transferred to Iowa. There's no depth behind them at all. And then as far as defensive backs go, they lose their top 2 corners. And yeah, it's another huge question mark as far as the position groups go. And honestly, Mason said they might improve. I think they're going to take a step back and get worse. There are too many questions here, especially O-line, huge question mark. Cornerback, huge question mark. Quarterback, wide receiver, running back, still bad. But O-line and cornerback, especially in the ACC where you have some really good talent on defensive lines throughout the conference and really good passing games, those need to be good for you to have any success in this conference. And, with a bad O-line, it doesn't look to be getting any better. I don't think you're going to be protecting a FCS transfer quarterback very well. So that's all I got on these guys. Tried to make it brief. There's not a lot to talk about here.
They also didn't make it too easy on themselves with the non-con games. Yep. They got a not great schedule for where the roster's at.
So, Mason, do you want to go through the schedule?
Yeah, so they start off Labor Day weekend against the number 11 ranked Tennessee Volunteers, followed by James Madison. Big Ten's Maryland, NC State. September 30th, they're at Boston College. come back home against William and Mary, followed by a bye, then at UNC, at Miami, November 4th, Georgia Tech, at Louisville, home against Duke, home against VT.
That non-con is so the Tennessee. I think that's a neutral site game. I want to say that's at the Speedway.
I didn't know they did that.
They did it for a No, sorry, it's at the Titan Stadium. I was thinking of the Georgia Tennessee game they did at the Speedway a couple years ago. Nissan Stadium. Thank you very much. So going through the schedule, their first 4 games: Tennessee, James Madison, Maryland, NC State. They're starting 0-4. They will win against William and Mary, and they will win against one of the other bottom feeder ACC schools. I have them going 2-10, 1-7 in conference. There's a chance they go 0-4 in the ACC, but it's hard to predict a team to go 0-4 when there's a lot of bad teams at the bottom. And they play, I believe, all of them.
It's funny when really hate that. I feel like we're piling on Virginia here, but it's just what it is. Their over under is 3.5, and I love the under.
I love the under here, dude.
It's just one of those years that oh man. You gotta think they're just itching and crawling to get to 4, but I don't see a path there.
If they were to get to 4, they would have to beat all of Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Virginia Tech. I mean, Virginia. 2 of them are at home, but they're really bad. I think I'm going to bet the under there.
I'll take it too.
Dude, yeah. Oof.
That's a good way to sum it up. Oof.
Oof.
All right.
Tony Muskett, though.
Tony Muskett, great name. You know what? Virginia, you got a great quarterback name. And we're going to move on to Virginia Tech. So I'd like to give a shout out to I have a ton of Virginia Tech coworkers. A couple of them went over my notes and helped me write it. So give an overview. Last year they went 3-8. Their last game against Virginia was canceled. Head coach Brent Pryce in his second season after being a Penn State co-defensive coordinator. Not a great first year for Brent Pryce. They lost to open the season against Old Dominion, who almost had wins over both VT and UVA, if not for that last second field goal for UVA. They got crushed by West Virginia, one of their rivals. They let Izzy Abanikanda set records on his defense, and their offense was absolutely terrible. The defense got better as the year went on, but they could not make up for a really, really bad offense who scored only 19.3 points per game last year.
Tough sledding here in Virginia.
Yeah, it's the good thing for Virginia Tech is we'll get to it, but they have one of the most comically easy schedules of the bad teams, right? Like if any team from this tier is going to make a bowl, it's probably them. But let's start going through the roster, right? So at quarterback, they return Grant Wells. Last year, the Grant Wells show did not go as planned. He was already a turnover-prone quarterback from his time at Marshall, and as history showed, he was turnover-prone at Virginia. He had 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 59% completion rating. Right now, they are starting a quarterback battle between him and Baylor transfer Kyron Drones, a former 4-star quarterback out of Texas. He's a dual threat who could make the offense better just because he isn't Grant Wells. But we'll see who wins the starting job. If Grant Wells is the starter again, I think this team has handicapped itself unnecessarily. As far as the run game goes, there is some hope here, right? They do lose their top 2 rushers from last year. Their leading returning rusher is Grant Wells, so it sort of adds to the question of if a mobile quarterback can help the offense. Now, they do bring back a They do bring back Malachi Thomas, who was their leading rusher in 2021 from injury. He was out all of last year. From what my Virginia Tech coworkers tell me, he was really good. He's like the real deal. They also brought up a 1,000-yard rusher from FCS North Carolina A&T. Now, yeah, Malachi Thomas only played 2 games last year. He was running back 1 before he got hurt. He had a couple monster games as a freshman in 2021. If he returns to form, comes back from injury, he will be better than what they had last year. Behind those top guys, there's Chance Black, who had 147 yards last year. So they really need Thomas to stay healthy there. Let's see. Wide receivers. They did not have any good wide receivers last year. Their leading returning receivers, their tight end, who only had 256 yards last year. Now, they do bring in a really good transfer from ODU, Ali Jennings. If you can't beat them, steal their best player. He went off against them in the upset win in week 1. So I do like the addition of Jennings. They also brought in Middle Tennessee's Jalen Lane. The thing is, it doesn't matter if their quarterback sucks. Moving on to O-line, they had a very bad O-line last year, only 111 yards rushing per game, and they gave up 33 sacks. They lose 2 starters and one of the best O-line coaches in college football, and Joe Rudolph, to Notre Dame. There's hilariously bad depth here, and just like Virginia Tech's line is another major concern that could completely kill their offense. Moving to defense, defensive line brings back 7 starters from a pretty good defense last year. They did not produce a lot of sacks. They're deep at D tackle, but D end is sort of the returning starters didn't play that much. Linebackers, they lose Dax Hollifield to the NFL, I believe. I don't know where he went. They bring in this transfer from VMI, Stone Snyder, another, that's a great linebacker name. He was a tackling machine in his 4 years there. I think he had something like 300 tackles in 4 years. And their number 2 guys coming back from injury. Now, as far as defensive back goes, this is another rough unit. They lose 4 starters from a pretty good pass defense last year. They do have one guy to note, Mansour Delane. He was a true freshman at corner last year. He was really PFF liked him a lot. Virginia Tech fans expecting him to take a step forward this year, but it's probably going to be a rough year. You have a lot of underclassmen slated to start. So just like Virginia, there are questions about O-line, cornerback, and quarterback. However, unlike Virginia, they do not have a schedule that's going to absolutely end up killing them. Mason, why don't you take the schedule away?
So they're running back Old Dominion to open up the year. Then they bring in Purdue, followed by another Big Ten opponent at Rutgers. Then they go over to Marshall. Pitt travels there to Virginia Tech on September 30th. October 7th, they get FSU. At FSU, then home against Wake Forest, bye. Home against Cuse, at Louisville, at BC, home for NC State, capping it off at Virginia to end the year.
So like I said, starting with the non-con, right? Old Dominion, Purdue, Rutgers, Marshall. I think they win against Old Dominion and Marshall. I'm going to give them one of 2 out of Purdue and Rutgers. There's a chance they can get both. I think Purdue is going to have a really big fall off from last year. They lose pretty much all their good offensive players, and they bring in a defensive-minded head coach. Rutgers is Rutgers. I think the more likely win is Purdue. So they start 3-1. Unfortunately, moving into ACC play, they do not get handed any favors with Pitt, FSU, Wake Forest, Syracuse, and Louisville. I think they lose all 5 of those games. The wins on the schedule I see are Boston College and Virginia in conference. If you squint your eyes, maybe they can upset like NC State or Wake Forest, but I think 5-7 is probably the most likely outcome here, and that is on a very, very easy out of conference.
Yeah, they're basically Virginia that got a little bit a little bit more frisky in the transfer portal, and have a much easier schedule. I think if those two things didn't happen, they'd probably be at that same 3.5 over under for wins for the season. But schedule definitely helps them out.
The number I had here was 5.5. I'm not going to touch that number. I think that's pretty spot on.
Yeah, it's not as lovable as the under 3.5 for Virginia, especially because whenever you're at that 5.5 line and you're playing for that 6th win, that to go bowling, there's always a little bit more on the line. So that is what scares me with them, because with the schedule, I could see them being a bowl team. Something fluky happens in the middle of their schedule there, and they're in Cheez It Bowl or something.
Exactly. I'm not gonna lie, I like the under here.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to. I think they start 2-2. I think they beat ODU and Marshall, and they lose those two in between. And
they lose the 2 Big Ten games.
You're gonna tell me they're gonna win 4 games after that? No.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't think they're going to beat one of the bottom Big Ten teams, then obviously I'm super low on Purdue this year, so I gave them a 5th. But then again, they did upset Liberty last year, and they came pretty close to beating Miami. Well, Miami was bad, but they came pretty close to upsetting NC State as well. So, like Mason said, it's in that range where a fluke win really messes you up.
Yeah. I personally, what it comes down to is I don't think they're going to make a bowl. So, therefore, they're not winning 6 games.
All right. Kent's laying down the law.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If you ask me tomorrow, I might take the under with you, Kent. Do we have to make picks for each team?
Do you want to?
I think we should.
We might as well.
All right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if these lines are accurate. I don't know if someone can pull it up, but I got these when I wrote these originally, so they might have moved a little bit. So I'm going to start talking about Georgia Tech. I'm going to have one of you check the lines if
I'm diving right now.
All right, we got Ken on the job. All right, Georgia Tech last year they went 5-7, 4-4 in the conference, and Brent Key is in his first full year as a coach last year. If you'll remember, he was the interim coach. Now, Georgia Tech promoted alumni and former assistant head coach, O-line, and run game coordinator Brent Key last year, and undoubtedly he saved the Jackets from really like a 1-11 season under former head coach Jeff Collins, highlighted by upset wins over Pitt and UNC as 22 and 21-point underdogs respectively. Now, the question is, how does he follow up a season where you save a team from the dumpster? Because he's not getting any help because 22 players left the program via the transfer portal in the offseason. That's not something you really want to see when you're promoting from within, but that's sort of against the point. Let's start with the quarterback room. This is not a good quarterback room by any stretch of the imagination. Straight up. You're not off to a good start here. So last year starter Jeff Sims escaped Atlanta and willfully chose to play for Nebraska. The top guy here is now Texas A&M transfer Haynes King, who, by all accounts, he sucked ass at A&M with much better talent surrounding him, posting what I would call a Slovis-esque stat line during his time at College Station. He also won and lost the starting job 3 times in 3 years there, once to injury and twice to sucking. And then their backups are Zach Gibson and Zach Pyron, I believe that's how you say it, from last year. They're still here, but neither of them had a positive touchdown-interception ratio for the Jackets last year.
That's tough.
It's pretty bad.
You weren't lying about not a great QB room.
No. Kent, what did you have?
Oh, yeah. I just checked the win totals for you. So, yeah, UVA 3.5. Virginia Tech is actually over under 5 right now. So, might get a push there.
All right. Give me under. Give me under for Virginia. I'm going to take over for Virginia Tech. You get that push insurance.
All right, over 5. And then Georgia Tech is correct, 4.5. By the way.
All right. Yeah, okay, we'll get back to Georgia Tech. Okay. Moving
I'm
on.
going to go with under 5 for Virginia Tech. I'm just really low on them. Plus, it's plus money, so I'll take it.
Okay, all right. I don't hate that. Let's move to running back and O-line. I can find you guys. Georgia Tech lost their top running back from last year, who, if you'll remember, went for 157 yards against Pitt. Yay. They take Louisville transfer Trey Cooley and return backup Dante Smith. Now, I'm going to combine the O-line here because they are returning 4 starters from last year. They did run the ball fairly well, and they brought in a Clemson and a Princeton transfer to compete for the final spot they have open at right guard. If they do have a strong O-line, it's going to help create a decent run game for them to lean on because, like I said, their quarterbacks suck ass, and they're going to have to run the ball a lot. At wide receivers, Georgia Tech loses their top 3 wide receivers who total over 1,000 yards for them last year. They took an A&M, Bama, and Duquesne transfer to fill that production. I'm of the mind if you're taking a A&M, Duquesne, happy for those guys. Duquesne guy gets to move up. If you're taking an Alabama transfer, Nick Saban doesn't let his good players transfer out. That's all I'm going to say on that. Also, nobody real is throwing them the ball, so it doesn't really matter. Defensive line, they returned 3 starters, but they let up 189 rush yards per game last year, and they have no pass rush guy. Don't care. Linebacker, they lose 2 all-ACC guys who both had over 100 tackles last year. They are poised for a huge step back. At defensive back, they bring back an all-ACC safety in Miles Brooks, and I don't like anyone else here. One safety does not make a pass defense whole. Recap. Haynes King stinks. He's probably going to make your offense worse from last year, and the defense loses way too much when you need continuity to help what's going to be a struggling offense. I don't think they're going to escape from the cellar this year. And as always, as the same with last year, they don't do themselves any favors in the other conference. Mason, take it away with the schedule.
Yep. So they kick off the season home against Louisville. They then have South Carolina State coming to town. Next week, they're at Ole Miss. Oof. Then at Wake Forest. Back home against Bowling Green. At Miami. They get their bye week. Home against BC. UNC comes to town. At Virginia. At Clemson. And then close out the year home against Hughes. And November 25th, they get Georgia.
It's a home game, man. I mean, I get it. That's like one of the oldest rivalries in college football, but they do not do themselves any favors by ending the year every year playing Georgia. I'm actually curious. When was the last time they beat Georgia?
I feel like Georgia had some not great teams before recent history. Maybe that's just because Alabama would win the conference every year that I think that, but I could see it being like 2011. When was Calvin Johnson there?
He was there, I think, between like 06 and 08. Okay. I pulled up the numbers, right? You'd be surprised. They actually beat Georgia in 2016 and 2014. Now, when do you think the last time that Georgia Tech had back-to-back wins over Georgia was?
1995 and 96. Shot in the dark.
98 through 2000. Pretty close.
All right.
But yeah. So going through that schedule, right? First 4, Louisville, South Carolina State, Ole Miss, Wake Forest. 1 and 3, they'll beat FCS, South Carolina State, and they will not win against any of those other teams. Next 4, Bowling Green, Miami, BC, and UNC. They'll beat Bowling Green. I have them beating BC, maybe. And And then their last 4, I have them beating UVA and then losing to Clemson, Syracuse, Georgia. No question about the 2 powerhouse schools there. As far as like games that are toss-ups, like BC is legitimately a toss-up for these guys. I think they'll pretty easily beat UVA, but other than those 2 teams, Syracuse is maybe the only other gettable team on this schedule. I think it's pretty solidly 4-8, 3-7.
Beating a Syracuse team that's sandwiched between Clemson and Georgia isn't.
You know what? You're right.
I mean, because I was thinking that too. Like going through the numbers here, it's like where do they get that other win? And Q's was the first one that really popped in my head. But then you see, oh yeah, they get Clemson on the road, and then Georgia is just they're going to be asking Kirby Smart to running clock for the second half kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, they'll be 4-5, right? And I think if you get pounded by Clemson, you're going to have like this team might quit because they're going to be like, all right, we just got killed by Clemson, and George is coming to our house in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and at that point, you can kind of see the writing on the wall of not going to a bowl. What are we really playing for right now? So that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back for Georgia Tech season.
Yeah. So, Ken, what did you say the over-under was? 4.5?
It's 4.5, and I'm struggling to make a pick here, if I'm being honest.
I'm taking the under. I think the fact that the only other gettable game, right, is Syracuse, maybe Wake Forest, but you're also coming off Ole Miss going into Wake Forest. Syracuse being with the timing that it is right off a Clemson game. I think pretty solidly I'm going to go under here. And I think even the Boston College game, that's more of a toss-up than it is a win. I just gave it to him because I don't trust Boston College to win a bunch of games.
With you on the under.
Dude. I'm trying to find a reason to pick the over. I want to pick the over.
You're going to get better. You're going to get better odds with the over. They'll probably juice up the over pick a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you're playing with hypothetical money here,
yeah.
Oh my god. Dude. I mean, yeah, I'll go the under with you guys because looking at their schedule, you're right. It's tough, but I will say this was easily the closest I went to.
After looking at this, I guess maybe I'll change my mind after we get through some of these other ACC schedules, but they arguably have one of the hardest schedules in the conference this year.
Georgia at 2 out of the last 3 weeks. You're putting yourself up at the top pretty quick.
Yeah.
Not only that, too, you have Ole Miss early in the season.
Yeah.
Louisville is middle of the road team. UNC is one of the higher tier teams here. Even like Miami, even if they still are a dumpster fire, they have more talent than you. Their players are most likely better than yours. It's going to be an uphill battle to beat them every time. But
you know what? I'm gonna flip. I'm gonna pick the over.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Just for some diversity on the graphic, is that
for some diversity? And I also think they can take one of either Louisville or Syracuse.
Okay.
We're about an hour in. I'm going to speed this up here. Okay, I can get these next couple things pretty fast. We'll get next to Boston College, running out tier 5, bottom tier. Jeff Hafley in his 4th season last year went 3-9, 2-6 on the conference. This is a terrible team last year. Dracovic gets hurt behind an absolutely awful offensive line. They put up 3 points in a late season loss to UConn. This is Hafley's first season where BC was under 500 in the regular season, and the first under 6 wins for Boston College since 2015. I think this is our first coach that's squarely on the hot seat this year that needs to make a bowl to save his job. One thing to note is they lost their DC to the NFL. They fired their OC, which has resulted in an absolutely insane coaching situation where 3 guys are co-OCing and 3 guys are co-DCing, including the head coach. That is the ultimate shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. Never a good sign of program health.
If you don't have one, you've got none.
If you don't have one, you got none. All right. Quarterback. Phil Dracovic is gone. Might have heard that news. They now turn to true sophomore Emmett Moorhead, who started the last 4 games, including upset win over NC State. Moorhead's kind of built like Dracovic. He's 6'6", 230, big arm, more or less unproven as a starter. Whatever. Running back. They're returning junior Pat Garrow, who had a 1,000-yard freshman season, struggled last year behind an awful OL, dropping to 403 yards and 3 yards per carry. He's the unquestioned number 1 back. He is the sort of NFL back that Boston College puts out every once in a while. But running back largely hinges on O-line development. At wide receiver, their best player by a mile last year, Zay Flowers, has moved on to the NFL. Ken, I know you know a thing or two about that. He takes with him about 1,100 receiving yards, doubling anyone else on the team. They also lost their number 2. They bring in second-team All-ACC wide receiver Ryan O'Keefe from UCF, who I actually think is pretty good, but they're going to need guys to step up to replace Zay Flowers' production. Also, Mike Tomlin's son is a wide receiver here. Just thought that would be a cool shout-out. So at O-line, Boston College has more or less been an O-line factory for the last 24 years or so, with 17 picks in that time frame. It fell apart last year. They allowed 46 sacks, only rushed for 63 yards per game. Now, the caveat there is that they lost their right guard with like NFL juice for the year, I think before the season. Then they lost also their right tackle and left guard before the 5th game. All 5 including the guys who got hurt, all 5 starters are back. They had 2 transfers with 10 starts to bolster depth. So they might actually have an improved O-line if guys stay healthy here. Moving to defense. Starting with D-line, this is a very, very bad defense last year. Gave up 30 points per game. Gave up over 4.5 yards per carry. They lose 3 starters, but bring back 3. There is one standout guy in this line. That's Donovan Izaraku, who had 8 sacks last year. He has some pretty cool highlights. He's got NFL juice. At linebackers, they lose their top 2 tacklers. They add an Arkansas transfer to fill the gap with that loss of experience. Oh, sorry. They've returned their 2 leading tacklers. I'm not even reading my own notes right. But they had an Arkansas transfer to fill the gap at the 3rd linebacker. So they do have some legitimate talent at linebacker, right? At defensive back, they don't. They lost their 2 starting corners and a safety from last year's team that was pretty good against the pass. They decided the best path forward is to add 2 FCS transfers from Harvard and Long Island University to match ACC wide receiver speed. It's probably going to be a bumpy year for the defense. If you're noticing something with the bottom tier, they all have questions at O-line and cornerback. As far as talent goes alone, BC probably has the greatest ability to move upward here because they do return some guys on the O-line. But like Pat Garbo is still here, but Moorhead as a quarterback is also unreliable, or not unreliable, but unproven. So is he going to be able to step up without Zay Flowers to overcome what should be a pretty bumpy secondary? Mason, the schedule, please.
Yeah, so they have we just talked about Georgia Tech and possibly one of the harder schedules in the ACC. They kind of give us one of the easiest schedules. They start us off with a home game against NIU, followed by another home game against Holy Cross. They then get FSU, travel over to Louisville, come back home against Virginia, and then go to Army on October 7th. They go followed by a bye week, then Georgia Tech, home against UConn, 3-game road stint at Q's, VT, Pitt, and then round the season off with a home stint in Miami.
Yeah, so as far as the wins on the schedule here, I think NIU, Holy Cross, UVA, and UConn are pretty solidly locked in at 4 chalk them up wins. As far as getting to 6, because Kent, is the over-under still 5.5 for these guys?
Great question. I should have been on it.
Get back to us on that. But like, as far as wins they could flip, like sort of toss-ups, I have them losing to Army.
Yeah, 5.5.
5.5. I have them losing to Army because they, like the defense wasn't very good last year. Army says they're going to actually pass the ball this year. I have a lot of faith in Army to finally get an upset over a Power 5 team. Maybe you flip Georgia Tech. Maybe you flip Syracuse. Maybe Miami is a dumpster fire again. You get them in the last week of the season at home. But, like, even though it's one of the easiest schedules in the ACC, they have so much unproven stuff. It all depends on the O-line staying healthy. That I have them at 4-8. I think I would take the under here. But, like, I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, I can see them surprising people. I think I'm going to rock with the under here too as well. And pretty much I think I'm just doing that because it's going to make it way easier to make picks later in the episode when we start taking overs for the good teams.
There we go.
I am going to go with the over here.
What are your other 2 wins?
I agree with the 4 locks you said. I think they get Army.
Yep.
And then I took the under with Virginia Tech. I'll give Virginia Tech that loss, so that'll be 6.
All right. There we go.
I that 3-game stretch, I could see. It's tough that they're all on the road, but I could see them stealing one of those. Let's just hope it's not Pitt.
Yeah.
My biggest thing.
No, I agree. I think all it takes is kind of like one. Yeah.
I think if they get to 5, it's more like at some point, if they reach 5 wins, it's more likely that they get to 6 than if they were to stay at 5. It's really breaking 4 is the question for Boston College. Okay. So we're done with tier 5. We're moving into tier 4. This is sort of what I have as like the bottom of the middle class. Tier 3 is going to be at the top of the middle class. Tier 2, actually good teams. Tier 1, playoff contenders. Starting in tier 4, we'll start with Syracuse. Last year they went 7-6, 4-4 in the conference. Dino Babers is back for his 8th season. I just want to point out before we get into anything, they do have one really, really good player. So Syracuse had a very funny season last year. They started out 6-0 with one of the country's easiest schedules before smacking into a brick wall, Wile E. Coyote style, with 5 straight losses before beating Boston College to finish over 500 for the first time since 2018. Sean Tucker's gone, though, so is Syracuse going to be able to make up for his production and make 2 bowls in consecutive years for the first time in a decade? Maybe. So as far as quarterback goes, Garrett Schrader is back. He was their quarterback all of last season. Robert Anai is not. We'll get to where he is later. But he was one of the biggest factors in Syracuse's offense, taking a step forward last year. Since their 10-win season in 2018, they have not been a great offensive team until Anai got here last year. However, that's sort of one thing to keep in mind is that their offense was really heavily carried by a lot of cupcake games. Now, they've promoted from within. They named Jason Beck the OC, and he's been with Anai and his former head coach, Bronco Mendenhall, for the better part of a decade. So it's the same system, so they are keeping the same offense. You wonder how internal promotions are always going to go, but as far as promotions, it's not the worst internal promotion you could ever make. To talk about the position, though, Garrett Schrader, I'm not a Garrett Schrader guy. He definitely took a big step forward last year, throwing for over 1,700 yards and 10 touchdowns for the first time. But like he was really bad against the non-bottom of the barrel teams, and it showed in games in Clemson, FSU, and Notre Dame. And it's his show now because at running back, Sean Tucker is gone. He was their first 1,000-yard rusher in 8 years. Just don't look at his numbers when he was playing Pitt. And who's replacing him? A bunch of nobodies. They do bring in the New Mexico State transfer, Juwan Price. But their other leading, like, I don't care. They're not that good. And to skip ahead to the O-line, they lose 3 starters and then return 47 career starts. I think the O-line is going to be bad. It's going to affect the run game as well as the pass game. Now, wide receiver, here's a guy you should actually care about. I think this is our first name to really care about. Their sort of wide receiver, tight end, flex guy, Aronde Gadsden Jr. He's back from last year, and he's the fucking real deal. If you'll remember, I think we were watching this game together, the game winner against Purdue. I don't have a lot of faith in the passing game because Schrader's the quarterback. I don't think his backup is very good either. But if there's one guy who can will the team forward, it's going to be Gadsden. The other guys here are Trevor Pena and Damian Alford. But like Gadsden is going to be an NFL guy. Now, moving on to the defense, they are running the 3-3-5 again. They brought in Rocky Long to run the 3-3-5, which is a very good defensive coordinator. Now, as far as the D-line goes, they have another Alabama transfer. Like I said, if Nick Saban lets go of a defensive transfer, he's not very good. However, Cuse was great against the run last year. I don't think D-line is going to be a problem. At linebacker, they bring back Marlowe Wax, who was a tackling machine. He was all over the field in last year's Pitt game. They returned 3 other starters and another guy back from injury. So linebacker is going to be a strength again. However, at defensive back, they lost 5 players who contributed last year, 4 of whom transferred out. This is probably going to be a pretty rough back end for the secondary. And so, oddly enough, under Dino Babers, offensive guy, it's going to be a defense-first team. I don't think Gadsden can carry an offense just because of who's throwing to him, but they're going to have a really good front seven that's going to be able to cause some problems for teams up front. However, if they take a big step back again, and it's Babers' like 5th losing season in 5 years, you might have him on the hot seat by year's end. I don't think they're going to, because they've got a pretty solid path to a bowl game this year with the schedule. Mason, take it away.
They start out the year against Colgate, and then another home game against Western Michigan. Travel over to Purdue before they come back home against Army, followed up by Clemson. They then go to Chapel Hill, then to Tallahassee against FSU. Bye week later in the year at Virginia Tech, home game against Boston College, November 11th versus Pitt in Yankee Stadium. Then they traveled back down south to Georgia Tech and cap it off at home against Wake Forest.
Okay, so let's start with the given wins. I think they're going to start out 3-0. Colgate and WMU don't really pose any threats to them. I think they beat Purdue again because they're going to take a step back this year. I have Army as a toss-up because the strength of Syracuse is their run game. Maybe let's try to make that to a win. As far as wins in ACC play, they're going to start out 0-3 with Clemson, UNC, FSU. That is a back-breaking sketch before the bye. But after the bye, they've got Virginia Tech, BC, and Georgia Tech. It's 6 or 7. They might not win all 3 of those games against those 3 teams. I don't think they beat Pitt or Wake Forest. I've got them at 6-6, making a bowl. I could see them getting to 7. Yeah, Ken, is the line still 6.5?
It is, yeah.
I'm going to go over here. I think I'm going to give the Army game to them.
I think they're going to be a 6-win team. They're going to go to a bowl. They're no more, no less. I think they're about as middle of the road as it gets, especially even in the ACC conference.
I agree. 6 wins.
The Atlantic Coast Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sitting right on 6 wins, so I'll do the under.
Don't love it, but if you made me pick a number, it would be 6-6.
I think this is the first tough over-under that we've had to look at as far as these teams go.
All right. We had some discrepancies on the last couple.
Yeah, we've had a couple over back and forths.
For me, this is the first hard one to pick because I'm sort of waffling on that Army game, but I'm gonna give it to him 7-5.
Dude, I'm just saying, like Clemson. Then you got to go to UNC, to Florida State. That's enough to just derail an entire season. That's awful.
I agree with that. I did factor that in, but they are playing 3 of the 4 worst teams in the ACC, and they also get the bye. And I think having those and then the bye, you can regroup. It's a good bye week. If say the bye was in between Clemson and UNC, and then they had to go UNC and FSU off the bye, I could see their season derailing from there. But
the other part of this decision that I'm making is another potential win that you see on the schedule for them here is against Pitt in the Bronx, and we don't want that. That's why they're a 6-win team, not a 7-win team.
I was never giving them that win. They're not going to be Pitt.
I mean, let's not rule anything out just yet.
I'm ruling it out. All right, let's move on to Wake Forest. Last year they were 8-5, but 3-5 in the conference. Dave Clawson is back for his 10th season. I believe making him the second longest tenured coach in the ACC, maybe third. So Dave Clawson, his slow mesh offense is back for another trip around the sun, the ACC. But this is with all new faces, players who helped propel this team from the cell of their conference all the way to a title game berth in 2021 are pretty much all gone. Sam Hartman's off to Notre Dame. Wide receiver A.T. Perry and defensive end Kobe Turner left for the NFL. So it's been 4 years of the Sam Hartman show, and the question for this year is, how does the team look different without him? So, and then the other question is, will the defense ever be decent enough to complement the slow mesh? No. We'll get to that later, though. So we'll start with quarterback. Exit Sam Hartman, enter Mitch Griffiths. Now, this is the only image I have in the entire spreadsheet. I want you guys to look at it. So his official team photo is he looks like he just farted before the photo, and he just smelt it. He's got some stank on that face. He's also listed as 5'11", 192, so he's a little tiny guy. His only collegiate experience is last year's Gasparilla Bowl against Missouri. I'm not expecting anything from him, but it's also the slow mesh, so it makes up for a lot of, deficiencies that a quarterback might have, like size or things like that. At running back, they returned their top rusher, Justice Ellison, who had 707 yards on the ground last year and 6 touchdowns. They lose a lot of depth behind him, but I think that's fine because this is a pass-first offense. You're not really going to hear about a Wake Forest running back unless they transfer somewhere else, i.e. Kenneth Walker III. So at receiver, they lose their top guy, A.T. Perry, who had 1,000 yards last season, was a huge part of that ACC championship run. They also lose an all-name tight end in Jaeger Bull. But they do return their slot receiver as well as their number 2 and number 3 receivers in Donovan Green and Jamal Banks. This is a pretty solid group. They added Tennessee transfer and Walker Merrill. And this is going to be a strength of the team. I don't think that they're going to take a step back. A.T. Perry is a really good wide receiver. But they're going to be able to be solid while Griffiths' play improves at quarterback. At offensive line, they're losing a lot of guys. They're losing their right guard, right tackle, and left guard. They're not known for being an offensive team, and I know they have a lot of guys who stay in the system for a while, but it's going to be tough to replace 3 guys in 1 year. They need to hold up and pass pro to keep this offense going, as always. And then defense, listen, let's make this easy. They have never had a good defense under Dave Clawson, and they never will. Teams have averaged 400 yards a game against them every year since 2017. They averaged 270 pass yards per game last year. It's going to be bad. Everyone knows it. It's all about offense here. So the question is, can the offense carry this dog shit defense without A.T. Perry and the Shart Man? It's S. Hartman. That's my new slander name is the Shardman for Sam Hartman. I think if Dave Clawson gets his team to 500, it's going to be one of his best coaching jobs to date. So, Mason, hit me with the schedule.
Yes. So they have an early August 31st game against Elon University, followed up by Vanderbilt coming to town, and then they go to Old Dominion. Another home game against Georgia Tech before a very early bye game. They do get the bye game before the following week where they travel to Clemson. Then they're at Virginia Tech. Pitt heads down there. They have a home game against FSU, travel to Duke, home against NC State, and then at Notre Dame, at Syracuse to round it out.
Is our over-under still 6.5 here?
Yes.
I'm going under. I think you've got 6 pretty solid wins on the schedule and 6 pretty solid losses. Elon, Vanderbilt, Old Dominion, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse I have as wins. Clemson, Pitt, Florida State, Duke, NC State, and Notre Dame, all losses. I have them at 6-6 on the dot, and I'll go under.
I'm on the over. I think anytime you start out a season with 4 wins, if you can scrounge out 3 more against, even with the production that they've lost, yes, they have a Swiss cheese defense. Yes, the slow mesh has given other defenses a lot of trouble before. I think they'll be able to find 3 more wins after that.
It's not easy finding the wins, though. They're playing like 7 of the top 8 teams in the ACC.
Yeah. And don't ask me which ones they're going to be because I'm not going to tell you. But I don't know. Wake Forest has done it to me before. It's been with Sam Hartman every time, but it's a little bit of a gut feeling here. But it's when you have a ticket for 7 wins and they start out with 4 going into a bye week. I know it's Clemson after the bye week. It just that's a good feeling. Maybe I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, I had the same thought, Mason. I'm like, it's hard to pick the under for a team that's probably going to start 4-0. Yeah, I think they can pull one out between that, like November 2, November 11. I think they might pull one of those out.
Duke and NC State, yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I mean, revenge game against Notre Dame. Sam Hartman game.
Sure.
Sam Hartman game. I don't know.
I wish that game was at home for them. But
yeah.
Yeah. In South Bend is tough, but
all right, so you're split. I'm the deciding vote.
Yeah, tip the scales.
Mason, I'm gonna go with the over. I agree. I think starting out 4-0 and not being able to win 7 is hard to fathom. But
yeah. Hey, this is college football, baby. We know some crazy shit's gonna happen down. Let's get to those 4 wins, and whatever happens after that, we'll live with.
Yeah. All right. Lock it in.
Moving into Tier 3 now. First team on the docket is Louisville. Last year they were 8-5, 4-4 in the conference. They have a new head coach and Jeff Brom, hired over from Purdue, where he won the West Division last year. This is the first team where I'm like, I don't understand the hype here. This team got blown to bits by the NFL draft and transfer portal. 6 of the 7 Louisville Cardinals who made the top 3 All-ACC teams in 22 are gone. 3 of them are draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. 5 defense starters are gone. 4 of the 6 who are honorable mention All-ACC are gone too. And none of those 10 departures include starting quarterback Malik Cunningham. So Jeff Brom might be better suited to coach in the ACC with his offensive mind instead of the Big Ten West. But he doesn't have a lot of tools in the box to get them to start good right away here. Quarterback, really quickly. Malik Cunningham is off the NFL as an undrafted free agent, and Brom took Cal transfer Jack Plummer to run the offense. Bad. Running back. Louisville does return their top rusher and backup, who rushed for combined 1,100 yards last year. That does soften the blow of losing your entire offense from Malik Cunningham. At wide receiver, they lose their top wide receiver, Tyler Hudson, who caught 29 passes for 1,000 yards last year, as well as 3 of their other top 5. They do return one of their top 5 who caught 31 passes last year. They bring in Georgia State transfer Jamari Thrash, another all-name team. To replace Hudson, he was a 1,000-yard receiver at Georgia State, as well as Jackson State transfer and Kevin Coleman. At O-line, they lose 3 of 5 starters, including 3-time All-ACC left guard and left tackle and right guard. They brought in 6 transfers to throw up the line. And I am sort of a person where if you're bringing in that many O-line transfers, it's not going to work. I'm interested to see how they play without a mobile quarterback behind center. But another thing to note is that Brom's Purdue teams are never particularly good at running the ball. They never top 152 yards per game rushing at his time in Purdue. I wonder if he can run the ball easier here than he can in the Big Ten West, but something to kind of look for. At D-line, moving to the defense, they lose first-team All-ACC Yasir Abdullah and second-team All-ACC Yaya Diaby at D-end, as well as 3 backups. They're going to have an extremely green D-end room, not a lot of experience on the D-line as a whole. At linebacker, experience is another major issue. They lose their number 1, number 2, and 9 tacklers in the linebacker room and 3 backups. Huge liability. As far as the secondary goes, they do return starters. They return 3 starters, and they bring in 3 Power 5 transfers, including former UNC and temporary Penn State transfers Storm Duck and cornerback Jarvis Brownlee. As far as my review for the team, Brom handicapped himself in year 1 by taking Jack Plummer as a quarterback. They've got a good skill core, decent enough O-line, but Jack Plummer's not really going to do a good job distributing. And then the defense, they need to find a front 7 fast to not get just demolished in the run game. However, Louisville gets a very easy schedule to get to a bowl as a welcoming gift for Jeff Brom. Mason, take it away.
Start us off with a neutral site game, neutral-ish, I guess you could say, because it is still in Atlanta. But I believe they're playing in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium versus Georgia Tech. Then a home game against Murray State. Home game another neutral site versus Indiana. Home game against BC. Travel to NC State. Home against Notre Dame. Coming to the AC. Followed by a bye week. Home against Duke, VT, Virginia. Go to Miami. Home against Kentucky.
All right, so right now I have them with 6 wins. I have winning their 2 neutral sites against Georgia Tech and Indiana, beating Murray State, and then in the conference they win against BC, Virginia Tech, and UVA.
So over under at 8, Kent?
Yeah.
It's 8?
Yeah. Not 8.5.
So here's the thing. Remember that take I just had where you want a ticket where a team starts 4-0? That's going to happen again. And that works to get you to 7 wins, but it doesn't work to get you to 8. I'm on the under.
Like you said, I think they start off with 4 easy wins. They might even I think they might get a 5th against NC State. But then you get Notre Dame, Pitt, and Duke, 3 really good teams. Then you end the season with Miami and Kentucky. They're not beating Kentucky for sure. Miami's probably the last team you can talk me into these guys beating. I'm on the under here.
Yeah, I was going back and forth on this one a little bit because, as Mason said, 4 straight wins to start the year. Although I did take Boston College over. So that 4th game, watch out for that one. Could be an L. They might not start 4-0. I'm going to ride the under as well. It may be a push. I could see, I think, max 8 wins here, so I'm comfortable taking the under.
All right.
Yeah, push insurance, baby. Nothing better.
Let's move on to Miami. Last year, they're 5-7. Mario Cristobal's in his 2nd year. So I'll be honest, I had my intern write this preview. He's a big Miami fan. So
Let's
Andrew,
go, baby.
very much. We're going to read your Miami preview. So this is quoting from my intern. While I am a biased scumbag, I think that Miami could beat the 7.5 win total. It's not a hot seat that Cristobal is on. Year 2 will be an extremely pivotal year for the direction of the program moving forward. The university has finally made a financial commitment to the program, and with that extinguishes all excuses. If Cristobal does not turn Miami around, it is entirely on him. He cut loose both of his coordinators from last year, a move that was widely and publicly rejoiced by Miami fans. With the departure of Josh Gaddis, Cristobal made it unclear he was unhappy with the offense last year. He envisions a hybrid spread offense with emphasis on balance and brought in former Houston OC Shannon Dawson. I believe the South Florida Flamemakers stashed on the depth chart with the addition to the portal in 23 class. Miami could be a real player in the ACC this year. As mentioned above, the 23 class for Miami is potentially be the most impactful class of the program in 20 years. The addition of Francis Mayoga on the offensive line can't be understated. He will start day one at right tackle for the Canes, and if all goes accordingly, he should be a freshman All-American. He's a generational talent, barring injuries, a day one guy on draft day. I believe you'll see six or seven of these guys get serious playing time and rotational capacity by the end of the season, push for starting jobs. Cristobal has also dramatically flipped the roster to the portal and has brought his instant impact guys on the offensive line, which is a massive position to need. Javion Cohen and Matt Lee are both future NFL guys and have earned the high praise from Cristobal and should help shore up that group. The addition of Tyler Harrell on the outside should provide a deep threat, as long as it's been lacking for Miami. Additional Devontae Brown and Jaden Davis will compete for the starting cornerback positions this fall and help provide depth to a much-needed position. He has Miami going 8-4. We'll get to the schedule later. This is my response to my intern, Andrew. Mario Cristobal has certainly built the program in the image of Mario Cristobal, meaning taking a super solid foundation on the offensive and defensive lines, which to build the rest of the program out from. There's a ton of turnover on the staff, like he talked about. He loses 3 co-OCs and 2 co-DCs, leaving to other positions. To be fair, Gaddis was fired because he sucked. His OC hire it's all right, in my opinion, but hiring Lance Guidry out of Marshall is my more favorite of the 2 hires. However, this team pretty clearly quit on Cristobal last year and wants to say they won't do that again, in my mind. Their Mad Money NIL booster, John Ruiz, is under federal investigation, and this team has so much ego that it makes Antonio Brown blush. So Miami loses 2 cornerbacks to the draft from last year. They lose Will Mallory to the draft, a guy who seemingly was there forever. Their top 2 tackles both leave, taking 70 starts with them. I agree with them, though. Mawioga is probably going to start day one on the O-line. As far as the offense goes, I'm not sold on Tyler Van Dyke. His breakout season, he was incredibly inconsistent, and then he was absolute dog shit last year. Henry Parrish is back at running back, who's okay, solid contributor. But I'm writing off Tyler Harrell, who's now at his 3rd school where he's going to be extremely hyped and do jack shit. They have an eighth year Oregon transfer tight end. He should have entered the LinkedIn portal in Cam McCormick. As far as defense, though, listen, he did a solid job. They brought in Akeem Messidor from WVU at the end and breakout Wazoo linebacker Francisco Mawioga, no relationship to the O-lineman, to shore it up. They returned 2 other stars at DL. They have a dangerous 3-man linebacker room, an All-American returning player at safety in Cam Kinchins. The defense should be pretty good. Unfortunately, Mario Cristobal is a terrible in-game coach and refuses to produce an offense that is anything less than pedestrian. Mason, the schedule, please.
Kick us off with Miami of Ohio, followed by a home game against Texas A&M. They run into the juggernaut of Bethune-Cookman in week 3, followed by a game at Temple. They then get the bye, another early bye, followed by a home game at Georgia Tech, then off to Chapel Hill against UNC, home against Clemson, home against Virginia, road trip to Raleigh, NC State, road trip to Florida, home against Louisville, at Boston College.
All right. So I have them at 7-5, and I have them beating Miami, Ohio, Bethune-Cookman, Temple, Georgia Tech, Virginia, BC, and then I had them beating one of NC State or Louisville, but I don't know. I think they might get 2 out of 3 of UNC, NC State, and Louisville just because NC State's offense. No, probably not. Yeah, they'll probably get 1 of NC State or Louisville. Forget anything about UNC. They'll be, and then they're gonna lose bad to A&M, Clemson, FSU. Ken, what's the over under here?
7.5.
I want to say over, right? Because NC State and Louisville are very gettable teams. But then again, they have a very early bye. And those games are after UNC and Clemson, which could really, really affect the team as far as quitting on them. And then they're going to lose in a bloodbath to Florida State. So that might they might quit on them after that game. So
year 2 Cristobal will be better. don't think it's going to be 8 wins. I don't think it's going to be 8 wins, though.
Yeah, I'm going to go under. I think I'm going to stick with my 7-5 prediction here.
I'm going to take the under as well.
I'm taking the under as well. So.
Uh-oh. If we're all picking it, that means it surely won't happen.
Yep.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
Okay. Let's move on to NC State, our last team in Tier 3. So, start off with NC State. I'd like to apologize for hyping them up last year for them to only go 8-5. However, this is not legally admissible evidence in court, and I cannot be held accountable. This is another team that loses a lot of production from their run between 2020 and 2022, where they won 8 games a year. Most notably, they lose Devin Leary at quarterback and Thayer Thomas and Devin Carter at wide receiver. They do bring in former Syracuse quarterback Robert Anae, who is a marked improvement over their previous coordinator Tim Beck, now at Coastal Carolina. They're reuniting him with Brennan Armstrong, and this is the OC that got a career year out of him back in 2021. But the question is that pairing enough to overcome a giant talent drain from the offseason? Now, as far as Brennan Armstrong goes, I'm not a huge Brennan Armstrong fan. I think that Tony Elliott legitimately broke him. I see the vision reuniting with an eye because it's the same thing that Pitt's doing with Phil Dracovic, but I think they'd be better off if they just went with the sophomore MJ Morris and let him develop more, because he started the tail end of last year following Devin Leary's injury. At running back, they have a running back by committee approach. I'm not even going to try and predict it. At wide receiver, they lose 3 of their top 4 receivers, including Thayer Thomas and Devin Carter. This is a wide open competition for who's going to be catching balls here. This group feels pretty barren as far as skill position goes. O-line is the most solid group on this offense. They bring back the center and the entire right side. They brought in transfer from Clemson and Oregon to shore up the left side, and I do like taking linemen from those schools, taking just a couple transfers. I think with the O-line is I'm curious if Robert and I takes the Virginia approach where running the ball is useless and not worth his time, or if he goes with the Syracuse approach, which is a balanced attack. That's something that sort of won't know until we see it. Moving over to the defense, the D-line is still really good. They bring back a 6-deep rotation on a 3-3-5 defense. They bring back Savion Smith off injury, as well as defensive end Devin Vaughn and D-tackled C.J. Clark coming off fantastic years from last year. At linebacker, they lose the heart and soul of the defense in Drake Thomas, but they bring back a tackling machine with Peyton Wilson at will linebacker. They've got some program guys stepping up here, and this is a program that just produces solid linebackers, so I'm not too worried about it. At defensive back, they lose an all-ACC safety in Tanner Ingle, but they do bring back a lot of talent. Aiden White was first team all-ACC at corner, and opposite him is another former all-ACC honorable mention at corner. Safety is the biggest concern here. I don't know. It just feels like a very middle-of-the-road team, poised for a step back after, not a step back, but sort of the same middle-of-the-road team in the ACC. They're probably going to stay afloat, but the real question is, what does reuniting Brennan Armstrong with Robert and I look like? Mason with the schedule.
They kick off our season with a road game at UConn, followed by another road game in South Bend. They then return home to face VMI, another road trip to the University of Virginia, followed by home games against Louisville and Marshall, another away game at the Duke Blue Devils, and then we get our bye week. Perfect timing before they face off against Clemson and Miami, then a trip to Wake Forest, trip to VT, rounding out in-state rivalry with UNC.
Kent, is this a 6.5 still?
It is.
All right. Looking at the schedule.
I like the over a lot here. I like the over a lot.
Talk me through it.
Minus Notre Dame. Very easy start to the season here. Dude, I could see them getting Duke. I could see them getting UNC at the end of the year. They'll probably beat Wake. They'll probably beat VT. Like they're there's just a lot of gettable games for them. And kind of like we talked about, like you said it yourself with the O-line that they have, and kind of they did pretty well in the transfer portal. I think that'll be enough to get them to 8 wins. Even though I know Brennan Armstrong was kind of questionable in the past, I think reuniting with the old OC, they're going to be 8-win team, 7-8 win team.
I also love the over here. So for a lot of the same reasons, actually, yeah, I think they could get Duke. I think there's, definitely a lot of games here. There's enough solid wins to get them kind of right, I think, at that marker. Just under the over. I think they pull out a couple. Like you said, I think definitely at least 7 wins to get them the over, potentially 8. So
those rivalry games with Duke and UNC, they go crazy for them, and great game day atmosphere. So like the fact that they get that one at home with UNC, not sure what the atmosphere is like in Duke or in Durham. I don't think it's probably that great. So I don't know. There's some. They're going to be an interesting team after their hype last year.
Mm-hmm.
I've got them at the over because I think they do have 7 solid wins on the schedule between UConn, VMI, UVA, Louisville, Marshall, Wake Forest, and Virginia Tech. And then, like you said, rivalry games just get weird. Like they upset UNC last year with their 4th-string quarterback. So I think it's a fairly – I don't want to say this, but I don't see them not getting to 7. All right.
Yeah. No, I think we're all in agreement there.
Consensus over.
Yep. All right. NC State rounds out Tier 3 for us. Now we're moving into Tier 2, which are the teams I actually like in the conference, or I think that are actually good. And we'll start with Duke. We don't want talking about Duke. I'm buying on Duke. I think the Duke hype is absolutely real. Last year they went 9-4. Mike Elko was in his 2nd year here. There's a team that really surprised a lot of people last year. And then to cap it off, they're bringing everybody back. They have to replace their DC who stepped away from the game due to personal reasons. But let's be real, Mike Elko is calling his own defense. They're bringing back 98.6% of passing production and 99.1% of total receiving production and 99.6% of total rushing production. This is going to be a breakout year for quarterback Riley Leonard. Let's get right to him. Last year's stats for Leonard were 63.8% completion percentage, almost 3,000 yards, and a 20-6 touchdown interception ratio. He was also Duke's leading rusher to boot. He's very accurate. He takes care of the football. He's a great distributor to his playmakers out wide. He's actually surpassed Daniel Jones in most statistical categories before his junior season. His legs are not to be doubted, and he put those ball in the right spot every single time. Now, at running back, if you're going to build on last year, right, you have to hope that Duke does not have to have Riley Leonard be the leading rusher again. But to fix that, they bring back 4 of their other top 5 running backs, headlined by Jordan Waters, who rushed for 566 last year. They also bring back Jaquez Moore and Jalen Coleman, who were also the number 3 and number 4 pass catchers on the team, respectively. Now, wide receiver Jalen Calhoun is another star in the making. He caught 62 balls for 873 yards and 4 touchdowns last year as the number 1 receiver. And then their number 2 guy is converted quarterback Jordan Moore. Duke returns all 7 players who caught more than 10 passes last year. At O-line, Duke returns left tackle, left guard, and right guard with over 100 combined starts between them. And their left tackle is first team All-ACC. They brought in a Stanford transfer to play the other guard, and they'll have a competition at right tackle. This is a line that improved from their 2021 team. They only gave up 17 sacks and ran for 184 yards per game. If they stay healthy and continue keeping Leonard upright, this is going to be a big year for the Duke offense. Moving over to defense, Duke returns all 4 starting linemen from last year, headlined by Dwayne Carter, who led the team in sacks last year and 2nd all-team ACC. Having all your starters back is huge for a defensive-minded head coach. We all know this with Pat Narduzzi. The linebackers are the first position group to really lose something here. Shaka Hayward leaves, who was their number 2 tackler, and they lost 3 backups, didn't see a lot of playing time. This is definitely the thinnest position and could see a step back due to losing Hayward, and injuries could be a real problem for this room if they pop up. At defensive back, they lose their number 1 tackler and second-team All-ACC safety in Darius Joyner. Duke has 2 returning starters and brought in 2 transfers off injury from A&M and Miami. If the transfers work out, this could be a great unit, but they need to gel first as a secondary. However, I have confidence in Mike Elko, and even though they lose their number 1 tackler and second all-team ACC safety, he's a great coach, great developer. He's going to have that room looking pretty good. I mean, overall, this is an offense ready to improve on a really good year from last year, a loaded D-line. The questions are at linebacker and Narduzzi, but linebacker and defensive back. But like Pat Narduzzi, Elko has been known for producing defensive players. So the losses on that side of the ball don't hurt as much, just like I think they won't for Pitt. Duke has a harder schedule than last year. They won't be able to get as many wins to get to 9, I think. But with more experience, they should be able to adapt to the difficulty level being raised. Mason, take it away.
Definitely, like Zach said, a harder schedule than last year. Starting the year off with a home game against Clemson, then another home game against University of Louisiana Lafayette, another home game against Big Ten's Northwestern. They travel to UConn in the 4th week of the season. Home game against Notre Dame, followed by a bye week. Then we go home versus NC State, home versus FSU, at Louisville, home against Wake Forest, at UNC, at Virginia, rounding it out with us.
Is the win total still 6.5, Kent?
Correct.
I feel really confident about this. They're going over. I think, Lafayette, Northwestern, UConn, Louisville, Wake Forest, UVA. I think those are 7 pretty solid wins. I don't think they get Clemson. I do think they have a really good chance to upset Notre Dame. I don't think they'll get FSU, and I think they could upset UNC. I have them at 8 or 9 wins this year.
I'm gonna disagree with you, and I'm gonna go with the under. I'm looking at their schedule, and I think going with the under.
I'm going to take the over. I'm going to go right in the middle of you two, though, because I really don't think they're going to get to 8 or 9.
Okay.
But they'll get to 7. It's kind of where I stand on them. They're just one of those things that they did have a really great year last year, but now they're playing some of the big dogs. But I think we'll know pretty early on how good this team really is when you play Clemson week 1. Mm-hmm. So that'll be a great test to see where this team will kind of land for the year.
I think
6 wins, therefore under.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to get Clemson week 1 is really tough. I think their big test is home against Notre Dame right before the bye, because they're going to lose to Clemson, but then they're going to have 3 get-right games in a row with Louisiana, Northwestern, UConn. I think they're going to get Notre Dame. And I think if they win that game or even keep it close, they're a legit team. I would put less stock into Clemson week 1 than I would Notre Dame week 5.
Fair
enough. Mark it down. Kent's the only one with the under.
Kent hates Blue Devils.
He hates Blue Devils. All right.
Just so you know, it is plus money for the over. If you guys are really feeling confident about it, it's plus 130 for over 6.5 for the Duke Blue Devils this year.
What do they know that we don't?
They know that Kent is right.
You know what? Ask me about this one again at the end.
All right.
Nah, no take backs.
No take back season.
All right, good. Fuck it. I just wanted to say the same thing again anyway.
All right. I'm going to go to Notre Dame next. Last year, they were 9-4. They're 4-0 against ACC teams. Marcus Freeman is in his second year. I'm going to keep this one short because they're not a real ACC team, but we play them, so I have to preview them. Notre Dame has a bad quarterback in Sam Hartman, a coach who seemed to be not ready for the big stage, and they hired a subpar OC from WVU to pair with Hartman after they lost their OC to Alabama. I think this is one of Notre Dame's weakest teams in recent memory, and I think they're going to struggle against a pretty stout ACC schedule, in quotes. They play 3 of the top teams out of like the ACC's upper class. The defense should be solid again. You know, it is Notre Dame. They get some good recruits. But I don't think Sam Hartman will be throwing to better or, more importantly, faster targets than he had at Wake Forest. And I think the turnover-prone self he showed basically from the ACC's championship onward is going to be more apparent when he leaves the confines of Clawson's offense. Mason, real quick with the schedule.
So we have an Ireland game alert. August 26th, they play Navy over the pond. Then we get a get-right game versus Tennessee State. They then travel and play in Raleigh, NC State. Central Michigan comes to town. Ohio State comes to town. They go to Duke, to Louisville, to USC, bye week. We go to make a trip to South Bend, Halloween weekend. Before a away game at Clemson the following week, by part 2, because they're independent and they do that. November 18th, home game against Wake Forest, and November 25th at Stanford.
Actually, the second bye week is because of their week 0 game against Navy.
I guess that would make sense.
Kent, what's this line at right now for Notre Dame?
It is at 9, I believe.
9.
9 even.
9. Yep, 9.
Ooh. I really like the under there. Because basically I think baked into the schedule are 3 losses with Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. And then I don't think they win both of Pittsburgh and Duke. I'm going under here.
Give me the under for literally what you just said. They're not beating Ohio State. They're not beating USC. They're sure as hell not beating the Panthers.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with the under. I could see them going, I could see them winning 9, winning 10. A little hard to fathom. So I will go with the under as well.
That's also push insurance, baby.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next up, we're going to go through UNC before we get to Pitt to round out Tier 2. Last year, UNC went 9-5, 6-2. They lost the ACC title game against Clemson, and Mac Brown is in his 15th year at UNC, 5th time in this stint. It's year 2 of the Drake May show. He's got a lot less talent around him in his sophomore season than they did in his freshman year. The run game returns a lot of production, but UNC downgraded OC with former UCF offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey. They lost their offensive coordinator to Wisconsin, if I remember correctly. And by the way, noted dumbass Freddie Kitchens is on this staff. Just want to point that out there. I had no idea until I did this preview, but he's on the coaching staff here. The defense is bad as it's ever been under Mac Brown, and no matter how many blue chip recruits they throw into the meat grinder, they never work out. Basically, the question here for UNC is, can Drake May have another superhuman season to keep UNC in title contention? Quarterback, you know the deal. It's a Drake May show. He is one of the top 2 draft eligible quarterbacks in the nation with Caleb Williams. And I don't have really much else to say. At running back and O-line, they returned 98.6% of rushing production. They improved their O-line, bringing back 88 career FBS starts. Hopefully they bring some continuity because this was a line that was actively trying to get Drake May killed last year. At wide receiver, they lose their top 2 to the draft, Josh Downs and Antoine Green. They bring in MAC transfer Devontae Walker to try to make up for that. Notably, he went for 100 yards against Georgia last year in week 1, and they brought in Georgia Tech's top wide receiver, Nate McCollum. They return another 3 players who combined for 1,000 yards, and they bring back the top 3 tight ends. I think the skill takes a step back. If you have Drake May thrown to him, the drop-off in skill is sort of – you soften the blow, right? But they're not as good as Josh Downs and Antoine Green. And then really quick on the defense, Gene Chizik is back once again to run one of America's worst defenses. Weighing like an anchor around Drake May's ankles, I have no faith in this defense. UNC is a comical amount of blue-chip talent on the front 7 that never develops into anything. There's no experience in the defensive back room. They'll be throwing players into the fire. In 2022, this unit gave up 61 points to App State, 45 to Notre Dame, 35 to Duke, 24 to an absolutely anemic Pitt offense, 34 to Wake Forest, 39 to Clemson, and last but not least, 30 to NC State in a double overtime loss to 4th-string quarterback Ben Finley. I have no hope in a UNC defense, and I never will. Mason, hit me with the schedule.
They open up neutral site game against South Carolina. They then get a rematch of what?
I said the Cox.
Yes, thank you, Kat. They have a funny mascot. They then get a rematch versus App State. The Gophers come to town. They then travel up to Acrisure Stadium to play us, followed by a bye week. They then get Q's, Miami, Virginia at home, followed by an away game at Georgia Tech, home against Campbell, home against Duke, and then at Clemson at NC State. Kent, what do we have the over-under at here?
8.
8.
8 straight. And I will go first, if that's okay. And I'm going to go with the over. I see a lot of games on their schedule I like. I could very easily see them winning more than 8 games than less than 8 games. So, therefore, I'm going to go with the over. Could very easily see them finishing 8-4, and the push comes into play once again.
I think year 2, as bad as the defense is going to be, we're going to get year 2 Drake May. Bonus pick, sprinkle a little bit on a future for a Drake May Heisman Trophy, maybe. I don't know. Run the numbers by your accountant, but I might. I'm taking the over. They're going to put up points. It falls on the shoulders of year 2 Drake May, like I said, and I think we're going to get some good things out of him. I think he's going to live up to the hype.
If you'll allow me, I'm going to get weird with it. I'm taking a push. 8 on the dot. I think the 4 games on these schedule they could lose is South Carolina week 1, just because it's a week 1 game. I think Pitt upsets them when they go on the road to Pittsburgh. And I think they're not going to beat Clemson, and I think Duke gets them on the road. I'm going with a push, exactly 8-4.
I don't know if you get bonus points for that.
No, it's definitely negative points because Vegas has it set there for a reason.
Yeah.
The odds on that would be like minus 200 probably.
Yeah, what are the odds on a push? Do we have those?
The closest thing you have to that is like soccer when you can bet a tie.
Oh, yeah.
I think you can bet exact records, maybe. You might be able to. On some books.
I'll look into that. Oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna get freaky with it. I'm gonna go 8-4. I'm gonna get a little weird with it.
Okay, all right. It's the graphic.
I'm getting weird with it.
Second
Okay.
push is you could pick either of them and you still get the push. You just pick the push.
Do it.
Yeah, if you take the over, you still get the push, Zach. This guy just hates UNC.
Nah, I'm gonna stick with my gut. I'm going with the push.
He's sticking with the push.
I'm sticking with the push. You guys are being rude to me about picking the push.
I was here this morning. It goes both ways.
All right. So let's get to the preview everyone's been waiting for. Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Panthers. Last year, they were 9-4, 5-3 in the conference. They are our first ranked team from last year. They finished number 22. This is Pat Narduzzi's 9th season at the helm. Just to note, preseason ACC media picks just came back today. Also, the only Pitt player to be selected was offensive tackle Matt Gonsalves. A little bit of disrespect there. No love for Ben Sauls or MJ Devonshire or any of the other guys. So, to kick us off, we talked to death about last year for the Panthers, so I'll make it brief. In 2022, Pitt went 8-4 in spite of awful quarterback play the whole season with Caden Slovis. Offsetting that was a career/record-setting year for Israel Abanikanda at running back, an under-the-radar 1,000-yard year from Jared Wayne at wide receiver, and a strong defense featuring big-time names like Elijah Cansey, Hal Baldonado, Servassier Dennis, Brandon Hill, and Eric Hallett, among others. Every single one of those names that I just mentioned are now no longer playing for Pitt. So after a Sun Bowl victory to cap the year against top 25 UCLA, in a game which featured many of the contributors we're going to see this year, the question is, can Pitt build on that 5-game win streak the end of the year on in 2022? For this one, I'm going to open the floor for discussion after all the positions because you guys know Pitt the best, so I want your input. Let's start with quarterback, as always. Not sure there's a much more different looking position group here than quarterback. Keaton Slovis is off to BYU. Nick Patty's moved on from the sport after a 4-year career as our favorite backup in the world. Nate Yarnell is still here, though. Shout out, Nate. Placing the top two are Phil Dracovic, who was, I believe, named the starter recently by Narduzzi officially from Boston College to reunite with his old OC, and Christian Veillere from Penn State, who was originally a target for Pittsburgh out of high school. Dracovic brings a big arm, more mobility, and maybe more accurate throws than Slovis. But the biggest concern here is his durability, as he only played in 14 games over the last 2 seasons after his breakout year. I think that Pitt now has some very decent backup quarterback options at disposal between Veillere and Yarnell. But the team's engine is going to have to be quarterback this year after everything they lose. It's hard to predict anything right now because we don't know about Phil's health or anything like that. But you have to think he's going to be playing behind a much better O-line here than he was in Boston College. And I don't think people have been talking enough about the mobility of Dracovic. Think back to the end of the spring game when Frantel scores a touchdown on a bootleg. That's the kind of quarterback room Frank Sinay has built now with that mobile skill set moving into 2023. We'll get into it later, but with the lack of returning production at running back and wide receiver, there's going to be a lot asked for Phil Dracovic this year.
He's made for it.
He's built like that?
He's some might say he's him.
Okay. All right.
I don't know who's saying it, but some have said it.
You're hearing it. You're hearing it more.
Sources close to him are saying it.
So I have my hopes high, but I'm not sold on this move yet. I'm not sold on Phil yet. I am hopeful though. Like I said, the injuries, I know, I'm glad we have Beer also has some insurance in case anything does happen. But overall, I'm just kind of in wait and see mode here. I don't have that strong of an opinion, just kind of a gut feeling. I'm not completely sold on this yet.
I completely agree. Thinking back to last year when we started the podcast, we had super high hopes of the quarterback position with Caden. It is a wait and see thing, right? Drakovic's got durability issues. You don't know if it's going to work out, especially with a lot of wide receivers not coming back. I think the situation is better than last year. I think that Jurkovec is an upgrade over Slovis. I think Veillere is an upgrade over Patty, but it's the biggest question mark. Everyone knows the biggest question mark, and I'm not going to have any answers until they start playing football next month.
I just want the character arc of Phil Jurkovec to come back full circle, and that's really what I'm just rooting for. I hope he can stay healthy. I hope he can have a great season. And I think if he stays healthy, he'll be fine. It's not going to be let's knock on wood. I don't think it'll really be a play issue. He's played in this system. Like you said, he's in a better situation. We've seen what he can do. It's just a matter of staying healthy. And just like, I literally just think if he just went out and just like win the games we're supposed to, he'll be like a Pittsburgh hero.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. Anything else on quarterback before we go to running back?
Nah.
No.
Okay.
Let's keep it moving.
All right, running back. With Izzy Abana gone to my New York Jets, it seems that Pitt is looking to go running back by committee this year from what we've seen. So you got a three-headed monster with Rodney Hammond, Sibo Flemister, and Derek Davis, the LSU transfer. So what immediately stands out in this room, right, is right now there isn't a guy that we know who has the home run hitting ability that Izzy had. What I see is that all his other abilities got kind of split into the three backs, right? Hammond is great at not being tackled on first contact. Sibo's got that one cut ability, that little hop that we noticed at the end of last year that made Izzy dangerous on stretch plays. And Derek Davis is the big guy. He's 6 foot 210, and he's got the ability to run guys over and stiff arm people. If I think one of these guys is going to become another 1,000-yard rusher, my money's on Hammond. But listen, these are three really solid running backs. Obviously, I'm not expecting another Izzy Abanikanda type year, but if they can continue to just provide us with a solid run game, it takes a lot of pressure off of the quarterback. And if they are all going, that's a three-headed monster that defenses have to account for.
Running back by committee. It's the complete opposite of quarterback, where if you don't have one, you got none. We got plenty. We got perfect backs for whatever situation that we're in. Arguably, probably one of the better rooms I think that we have on the entire team is the running back room, just in terms of talent and ability. Get to see Hammond again, get to see some of these other guys take a step forward. Really, really excited for this group.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see Hammond. The whole group in general, but I think this can be a really big year for Hammond. Having the reins to really just take over as that number one guy, and definitely going to rely on him a little bit to get us going with the new QB in the room, but we'll see.
Yep. Okay, so wide receiver, tight end, I wrote a lot about this. This is going to be a long one, okay? We just went from running back, which, like Mason said, is one of the strongest rooms on the team, right? But if there's one position room that's the most concerning, the least deep, it is wide receiver. They returned 3 of their top 4 pass catchers in Kanata, Bub Means, and Gavin Bartholomew. They lose Jared Wayne, who led the team in receiving yards and touchdowns. Filling Wayne's production is going to be the key to get this passing attack back off the ground from the production year it had last year. I think we all like Mumfield here. He showed flashes of what he could have been during the Sun Bowl last year. And if Bub Means improves his hands, he can be a legitimately potent deep threat wide receiver. Bub showed some improvement the spring game that I hope translates to real production in the season. But let's look at the guys who are going to be stepping up to replace Jared Wayne. You have Florida transfer Dejon Reynolds, who was active in 8 games last year. flashing his 4-star ranking out of high school against Vanderbilt, going for 8 catches, 165 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's it. He had 3 catches the rest of the year. He's probably the most talented of the possible replacements for Wayne, but he's simultaneously the most proven while being completely unproven, only having 1 real game to his name. Turning to the roster, there are redshirt sophomores Chaden Wabuko and Addison Copeland III, as well as freshman early enrollees Israel Polk and Lamar Seymour, all 4 of which have a grand total of 0 snaps played at the college level. Narduzzi's gone on record saying we could see some playing time for some of the incoming freshmen, but once again, it's sort of a hard place to be in when they don't have any experience following up a 1,000-yard receiver. Moving on to tight ends, this position felt like it was lacking a lot of juice last year. In 2021, you had the dynamic duo with Lucas Krull and Bartholomew. They caught 66 passes for 700 yards and 10 scores. Last year, Gavin and Carter Johnson combined for 27 catches, going for 371 and 2 scores. Carter Johnson having 6 catches for 89 and 0 scores. And I think this is really just criminal misuse of Bartholomew. His breakout year, a lot of his use in positions came as like an H-back in a pistol formation, and he wasn't an inline tight end. Last year, he was used mostly as an inline tight end, and it was Johnson playing that H-back and wing position. I think genuinely those should be reversed. I think Gavin's better out of the backfield, and I don't think that Carter Johnson is very good. He's slow, lumbering. He doesn't add a lot of value in the run game, and I think Gavin's probably a better lead blocker than him. I think Johnson has more value being an inline tight end because he's the bigger and beefier of the 2 tight ends. You bring in transfer Malcolm Epps after a pretty lackluster career at USC and Texas, and 2 redshirt sophomores to provide depth. But I think I'd rather see the redshirt sophomores play over the other 2 guys besides Gavin. But really, I think it's a personnel change, a personnel deployment to fix Bartholomew and get him back to his productivity from his freshman year. I mean, realistically, if you're factoring in the loss of Wayne, the inexperience at wide receiver, you need Gavin to step up as one of your reliable top 3 options and get him into situations where he's using his skill set well, that it's going to be a passing game learning on the fly. And I think that Gavin's got to step up and they got to use him right.
Receiver room for me is like the X factor of the team, or maybe not necessarily the X factor, but the who's going to step up room. There's a lot of stuff that can be done there, and I think a lot of the guys are capable. But it's who's going to be that number one, who's going to be the guy, who's going to be the guy that we need. Because I feel like any of the guys, the top 3, maybe 4 in that room could do it. So, and then for the tight ends, I mean that's easy. Just use one of the better tight ends in the ACC to his full capability, please.
I just really hope this is a huge year for Gavin. I have always been a huge Gavin Bartholomew fan. Personally, I'm waiting for that just like huge breakout year.
He deserves it for sticking around and not transferring. Like he probably could have transferred. Yeah, a lot of places that would have gave him a better opportunity to go to the league. So he deserves that kind of bounce back year or breakout year, like you said, Kent.
I thought the level of use that he received last year was just like unbelievably low. You see what happens when you get him in open space. Tennessee game last year, he can make plays. You just got to give him the ball. I really hope that he's, really more of a focal point this year. Has the opportunity to really just have that breakout year.
I mean, the thing with Gavin, right, is I was looking back at his highlights from 2021, and a lot of his scores were when he was coming downhill out of the backfield, and that creates a leverage problem for linebackers trying to cover him. When you're sending him out from the line of scrimmage on these like 2-yard, 3-yard out routes, maybe a 7 or 10-yard out route, the linebacker has a much better opportunity to cover Gavin instead of him full head of steam coming out of the backfield. And I think that's got to change. And if that doesn't change, that is an indictment on the coaching staff, seeing what he did as a true freshman and not replicating that as a sophomore. But other than that, I don't know. We just need a guy to step up wide receiver 3. That's the question. We need We means to find his hands, Kanata to keep improving, and we just need to, like, if I had to guess right now, like, it's probably going to be a rotating door of wide receiver threes for the first quarter of the season. I have no idea who's going to step up. Smart money would say Deshaun Reynolds because he's played in games, but there are so many options to fill that third wide receiver spot that I don't know who's going to take it. Let's move to O-line. Pitt lost Carter Warren, Marcus Minor, and Gabe Hoy to the NFL last year, but they returned 5 guys with starting experience this year, and 3 of last year's starters for continuity. Matt Gonsalves, we already talked about, all ACC preseason pick. Blake Subovic at guard. And they bring back Jake Cradle at center. That's a combined 84 starts to the line. They're a huge part of the line. They created 4.6 yards per carry, a top 50 stuff rate, and only 19 sacks last year. There's 2 other spots up for grabs, one at guard, one at tackle. Per Pat Narduzzi at ACC Media Days, the tackles are going to be Matt Gonsalves and Branson Taylor. He has not decided what side of the line they're playing. And that final 5th spot is going to be a battle between Ohio State transfer Ryan Jacoby, who saw playing time last year, mainly as an extra blocker, and highly touted sophomore Ryan Baer, the highest rated prospect out of Pitt's 2021 recruiting class. If I had to guess, the loser of that battle will probably be the extra lineman that Cignetti likes to use in those run-heavy formations. And, they're probably going to have another guy that steps up as like a plug-and-play guy. You always have one of those on a Pitt O-line, even every year. It's been Gonsalves the last couple of years. I mean, every year he's been here, he hasn't been a starter starting the season, but he ended the season starting because he was just ready to play at any time. After the 5 linemen that came back last year played exactly 0 snaps as unit together in 2022. Listen, they're returning 2 all ACC players or caliber players in Gonsalves and Cradle. You have an experienced center who's the engine of the O-line in the run game. And a fun stat for everybody, Pitt's O-line provided the longest time to first pressure in the ACC last season. I mean, these guys are good. They are outside, probably on the offense. This is the best offensive room. They're the most proven. We know what they can do, and these guys are good. That's all I really have to say.
Really excited for this group with a mobile quarterback, too, as that kind of fits. See what they can do with that system. Because we saw that for one game last year in the Sun Bowl.
Dude, I'm shocked they only gave up 19 sacks. It feels like they gave up 1 million.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is. Maybe it was just because eye test on those sacks were.
They were nasty. They were annoying.
Yeah. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it really doesn't, I guess.
Yeah. Kent, anything on the O-line before we go to defense?
No, we can move on.
Okay. So let's start with the D-line. Everyone knows it. I'll say it at the front. The D-line loses a ton this year from last year, But if any position on the entire team has that benefit of the doubt with, being able to replace players year in, year out, it is Charlie Partridge and his defensive line. Cansey, Desmond Alexander, and Howard Baldonado left the NFL, and John Morgan transferred to Arkansas. So that is 3 out of 4 of our Week 1 starters from last year. David Green and Devin Danielson are back, who split the DT opposite of Cansey. I mean, at this point, it's safe to assume Pitt's going to just bring in some new killer who's going to absolutely harass the quarterback to stop the run. Guys stepping up this year are as follows. At edge, you have Dayon Hayes, Bam Brema, and Dekai Johnson, and redshirt freshman Samuel Okunlola, who's gotten a lot of press this spring as a guy who might step up early in his career. At tackle, Green and Danielson are first up. You have DeAndre Jules, Tyler Bentley, and redshirt freshman Sean Fitzsimmons, who really shined along with Okunlola in the spring game. I think they're ready to contribute early to this D-line room, which is still fairly senior heavy at the D tackle position. And, there's even more depth on the line. You have Nate Temple, Duquesne transfer Todd Hill, Elliot Donald, Aaron's nephew. And not many programs can reload like Pitt on the D-line, but at this point, there's no evidence presented to us that they're not going to.
I think that's why when you look at some of the ACC predictions and where a lot of people have us, or like even the win total is because of what we've lost here. When in reality, I think it's one of our, like it's our bet, like you said, the reload. We've done it before. So I think people are kind of sleeping on some of these guys that got a little bit of time, or maybe some of these younger guys, but we have an eye for this talent, and I really expect it to be another strong, the heart of our defense really next year.
I mean, over the last 4 years, I think they're number 1 in sacks in the FBS. I mean, it's the numbers back us up here.
You can't do that if you don't sustain talent for that amount of time.
I mean, when you think about it too, like you think about the guys who went through this room, like Jalen Twyman, Rashad Weaver, Pat Jones. These guys have all cycled out, and we still find guys to be able to create pressure like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just keep wreaking havoc.
Yep. Linebacker, another room with a lot of turnover. Criminally underrated middle linebackers Vassier Dennis is off the NFL, joining Collage in Tampa. FCS transfer Tyler Wiltz ran out of eligibility, leaving the room wide open for players to fill in. Returning from last year's Bengali Kamara, who really came on towards the end of the year with that pick in the Sun Bowl, and Shane Simon, the Notre Dame transfer, are Pitt's 2 top returning tacklers. Simon was graded the best linebacker in coverage in the entire ACC. Simon will probably be running the defense at middle linebacker, so there will be some learning curve there as he's replacing Dennis. Filling the third linebacker spot is the question here. You have Solomon Shields, who did see significant playing time last year. Could we possibly see younger guys play like Brian Lovelace or Jordan Bass? But you kind of want to keep those guys in. It's hard to replace the middle of the defense with younger guys. I think linebackers, the defensive relative weakness, because I do like the linebackers that's going to step up this year. But it's really about how quickly they adapt to being full-time starters with this schedule.
Yeah. Even more reason that the D-line needs to step up because of the talent that we've lost here. You can make up for poor linebacker play with good defensive line play. So we're definitely probably work out some of those kinks early in the year. Mm-hmm. But with the guys we brought in from, whether it be transfers or new classes, like, I think with the right amount of time, again, it's a group that can be serviceable.
It's not even like also they're all new. Like Simon and Kamara are also like their experience. It's really just about covering that third spot.
Yeah, right.
Let's move on to D-back real quick. This is sort of the most intriguing position on the defense. We know the corners. Devonshire, Marcus Williams, AJ Woods, great press corners. They're ball hawks. They are really good in coverage. Their spots in the starting lineup are set in stone, like basically safe as can be. It gets tricky at safety because both Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett were drafted last year, and we know how hard it is to be a safety in the Narduzzi defense. You're always on an island. You're asked with doing a lot. Replacing them will be Philip O'Brien, Javon McIntyre, and Florida transfer Donovan McMillan. This pass defense is going to need the safeties to learn fast, and it basically hinges on getting those 3 guys to be able to play at an ACC level. And looking ahead, the middle of the defense, between replacing guys at D-line, the third linebacker, and your safeties, you have a steep learning curve with UNC at home week 4. The offense should be improved, an upgraded quarterback. You got to get the wide receivers to gel early in the season. You got the running back by committee. As terrifying as this sounds, as far as Phil goes, Pitt goes. The floor and the ceiling vary pretty wildly based on how good the quarterback is. So, Mason, hit us with the schedule, please.
So, the long-awaited Pitt schedule. We get September 2nd. We kick it off with Wofford. Then we get Cincinnati at home. Travel down to our rival West Virginia. Then we get UNC at home. At Virginia Tech. Bye week. Home against Louisville. At Wake. In South Bend to Notre Dame. Home against FSU. Neutral site, Yankee Stadium game versus Syracuse. Home against Boston College. At Duke.
Is the over-under still 6.5 for Pitt?
If it is, that's just disrespectful.
I agree.
That's just disrespectful.
Ken, are we still at 6.5?
What it is? 6.5. It's 7.
It's 7?
Yeah.
I'm still taking the over there.
Smashing it.
Yeah. I'm taking the over. I think the only game I don't see us winning is Florida State. Between UNC, Louisville, Notre Dame, and Duke, I think you win 2 of those, you get to 9 wins. Another great year.
There's a non-zero chance that we go into the bye week 5-0.
I don't think it's out of the question.
Yeah. So, and then when the line's being pessimistic with the line being at 6, like
7.
I'm sorry, 7. Yeah, there's just. Am I biased? Yeah, but they're like you said. I think FSU is really the only game that I would chalk us up for a for sure loss.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else I could see us win. Now is that gonna happen? No, we know how Pitt goes, but they'll drop one and disappoint us. But it's
11-1.
11, yeah,
11-1. All right.
Yeah.
We're all on the over. We're all on the over, right? Yeah. All right. We've been podcasting for over 2 hours. I'm going to try and do my best to go through Clemson and Florida State as quickly as I can. They are the best team, so I did write the most about them. Let's start with Clemson. Last year, they're 11-3, won the ACC, finished number 13. Dabo Swinney's in his 15th year. I regret to inform you all that Clemson has not yet fallen off a cliff, and the schedule they have is ridiculously easy. Cade Klubnik was a revelation after DJU continued to struggle. Shipley's one of America's best running backs. He's a quirked-up white boy doing quirked-up white boy stuff, busting it down only in a way a white boy knows how. New OC Garrett Riley should bring life to a pretty lethargic offense from last year. They're struggling all facets of playing football. I mean, the front seven is as mean as ever. They still have 5 stars everywhere on that D-line. If there's a weakness in this team, it will come from the depth of the secondary. Talked about Klubnik. He was really good in the ACC championship game. He was really bad in the Orange Bowl against Tennessee. I think he's more likely to be the player we saw against UNC than Tennessee, but that's really the only question. He is a good quarterback. I hate to say it. Running back, Will Shipley, quirked up white boy. Sort of weird when you say a white running back is the focal point for an offense of a playoff contender, but that's just what Clemson does. Behind him is Phil Maffa, who's a bruiser. You have an excellent thunder and lightning combo between the two. At skill position, they bring back Antonio Williams, their leading receiver. They bring back dependable tight end Jake Briningstool as a safety net. They've got talented guys behind them, but they have struggled to stay healthy in their careers. Depth is extremely thin at the skill core on the outside. That's the biggest question on the offense. O-line brings 4 or 5 starters back. They have a 5-star to plug in at the 5th spot. They'll probably be good, if I had to guess. Front seven on the defense. Clemson is as Clemson was. Once again, they're elite. They have a front seven that's going to maul opposing offensive lines and make quarterbacks' lives miserable. 3 5-stars, 7 former top 100 prospects. Defensive tackle Tyler Davis is a superstar. 3 first-team All-ACC selections in 3 years. Defensive end Xavier Thomas is an All-ACC level player when healthy in his 6th year. Linebackers Barrett Carter and Jeremiah Trotter, those guys have shown their stars at the Power 5 levels, and it just is as it was. At D-back, this is probably the only question mark position on this side of the ball. Nate Wiggins is a really good cornerback, but there just aren't as many dudes on the back half of the defense as there are on the front seven. They were bad. They were worse than normal in 2022. You might think – I would attribute that to teams just giving up running the ball on them and just trying to pass. They were behind a lot. I mean, you're going to give up more numbers when you have bigger leads. Listen, they've got stars everywhere. They're thin at the skill positions. They've got a mean front seven. You get thin at these positions when you take small recruiting classes and don't like using the portal like Dabo does. The thing is, they just have a very, very easy schedule. Mason, go through it, but I'll share my thoughts on it after.
They are away at Duke, home against Charleston Southern, home against FAU, home against Florida State, at Syracuse, home against Wake Forest, bye week. At Miami, at NC State, Notre Dame at home. Georgia Tech at home, UNC at home, at South Carolina.
I'm seeing 11-1. Their over-under is 9.5. I'm taking the over. I think they lose to Florida State, even at home. And to really even see any other losses on the schedule, you got to squint really hard at like rivalry game bullshit with NC State or South Carolina. Maybe Drake May goes off in that second to last game, but that's at home. I mean, there just aren't a lot of chances for them to lose on this schedule.
Yeah, especially when all their hard games are at home. Like road games are about as easy as they can get. You could argue 12. You could really, if they beat Florida State, at that point you can argue 12-0.
If they beat Florida State, they're going 12-0. That's
So I really would be hard pressed to. I mean, especially after I think Cade Klubnik's going to take a step forward, like having a full year under his belt and not having to do the back and forth bullshit with DJ.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a little bit more confidence there. So this is an easy over for me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also going to go with the over here. I think Cade Klubnik's going to have a big year. And yeah, I don't see a lot of opportunities for them to lose on this schedule. So
pretty easy. Let's move to our last team, finishing out our ACC previews. Florida State. Last year they were 10-3. They finished number 11, highest ranked out of any ACC team. Mike Norvell's in his fourth year, who was on the hot seat only a few years ago, but has built probably a legitimate playoff contender in Tallahassee. Not the traditional way. They never signed a top 10 recruiting class, but they've been smart in the portal. They've had staff and roster continuity, and their player development has put them, in my opinion, in the driver's seat for a playoff start from the ACC. They returned 10 of their 14 All-ACC selections from last year and turned 17 starters. There is so much returning star power here in addition to one of the country's best transfer classes that this might be the first Florida State team to be playing meaningful games in December and January for the first time since 2014. Quarterback Jordan Travis is back for his senior year. He had a fantastic 2022, 3,200 yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions on 64% completion, adding another 400 on the yard and 7 touchdowns. He can do it all. Everyone knows it. As long as he stays healthy, he is top 3 quarterback in the ACC. Running back. They lose second leading rusher Trayshawn Ward to Kansas State, but this room is so deep that it basically doesn't matter. They return 1,000-yard rusher Trey Benson and their third and fourth leading rusher. Between those three, and Jordan Travis, they produced almost 2,800 yards on the ground. It's just keep clicking. It's what Norvell does. Wide receiver is one place they do lose a significant amount of production. Of their leading pass catchers, they lose number 2, 3, 4, and 7, including Ontario Wilson to the NFL, Micah Pittman to Oregon, their leading tight end, and Mark McClain, who is their number 7. They do have their leading receiver back, and he's scary. Johnny Wilson, 6'7", 240 pounds. He can catch the ball, and he's fast. 43 catches, 900 yards, 5 touchdowns. It's hard to guard a guy as big as fast as he can. He is a matchup nightmare for every defense he goes against. They brought in Michigan State's number 1 wide receiver, Keon Coleman, and tight end Jaheim Bell from South Carolina, who averaged 13.5 yards per catch. And friend of the program, Hakeem Williams, will probably see some playing time this year, former 5-star. At O-line, Florida State rushed for 214 yards per game last year. They only lost 2 starters. They also, to replace them, they brought in first-team CUSA right tackle Jeremiah Byers, and they returned a whopping 206 career starts to this line, not to mention 12 all-conference nominations between them. They're cooking with this line. They were 6th in the country for yards per play last year, and for good reason. Moving to defense, Jared Verse is a one-man wrecking ball at the end. The former Albany transfer decided to come back, even though he's an NFL-caliber player. They lose 2 starters. They turn to the portal to fill those gaps. They bring in a D tackle from Western Michigan and a D tackle from Miami, as well as returning their nose tackle. Patrick Payton's on the other side of the line, who had 5 sacks last year. Basically, the recipe for this defense is Verse is off in his own universe, making a tackle's life miserable, and you free up 3 other guys to do some real damage. At linebacker, they returned their number 2, number 3, and number 6 tacklers at that position in case they didn't have enough defense of talent. And then in the D-back room, they decided to get even better by stealing Virginia's best corner in Fentrell Cypress to add to a 5-deep rotation, replacing their number 1 tackler. They're thin at safety. There's not a lot of depth, so that's the real question on this defense. But this D-line is so good. Jared Verse is so good. The linebacker is so good that you can cover up the back end here. The ceiling here for Florida State, in my opinion, is the playoff. If they can split LSU and Clemson in the regular season, they're a lock for the playoff. And if they lose to Clemson, they can theoretically avenge it in an ACC title game. Looking at this schedule, Mason, go ahead. I'll give my comments after.
Start off the season versus number 7 in the preseason LSU Tigers. They then get a rebound game with Southern Mississippi. They then are making the trip to Boston College, making the trip to Clemson. They have an off week before they get Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Duke, all at home, trip to Wake Forest, trip to Acrisure Stadium, and then rounded out with Miami, North Alabama, and then a road trip to in-state rival Florida.
So other than LSU and Clemson, which are genuinely toss-ups, they're all really good teams, right? If you want to find another loss on the schedule, if it's really cold November 4th, maybe they lose at Pitt. Maybe it's a sort of Pitt special game taking down a top-ranked team, but I really think they're going 12-0 against this schedule.
You say that, but then you also look at going into the bye week and they could be 2-2. And then it's just that first – I mean, people want to crown them already. Were they good last year? Did they get a lot better? Yes. But, they beat LSU on that missed field goal, at the end of the game, or missed extra point, I think, technically. They're going to want revenge for that. The Clemson game being in Death Valley is not great for them. When you look at stadiums that actually give you a home field advantage, that's one of them. So I don't know. They definitely could be a playoff team, and we'll know by week 4 if they are. And then after that there's nothing. So it's going to be interesting to see how this team reacts if they are 2-2 after that, and then playoff hopes are gone, and kind of see where they end up. Kent, what's the line?
It is 10.
Yeah, I'm taking the under on that. They're a good team, but I don't know. 10's a lot.
10 is a lot, and I'm also going to go with the under. I want to believe in the Pitt Panthers. I'm going to give them a win, or I'm going to give Florida State a loss, rather, November 4th. And yeah, I think they start 2-2. I could see them beating LSU. I do not think they're going to go into Death Valley and beat Clemson this year. Yeah, I will take the under. It could be another push situation.
I'm going to take the over. I think I've made my case clear, but I do believe in these guys. And with that, that's all 12 teams. Championship picks. I'll go first. I have Florida State beating Clemson in a rematch of their Week 4 game.
I have the Pitt Panthers over the Clemson Tigers. The winner of that November 4th game is going to go to the ACC Championship, and it will be the Pitt Panthers.
I love that. I'm going to go Clemson over Florida State.
All right. Cool. This has been a long episode. Hey, man, this is our fall camp. This is a long episode. We're doing 2-a-days.
2-a-days, baby. Yeah, we recorded the first part of this in the morning.
All right. Obviously, we're getting into the season now. We're going to have more frequent episodes. Coming up down the pipe, we're going to have – I think we're going to put out an episode on sort of thoughts about conference realignment. And then we're going to be visiting the rest of the conferences, looking at over-unders we like, and making predictions for the rest of the conference championships. If you made it this far, all the way to the end, you are our strongest soldier. Thank you for listening once again. This has been Simplify Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Kaminsky. I've been joined by my wonderful co-hosts who podcasted for about 3 hours with me, including breaks, Mason Kling and Kent Vanderwood. If you like the show, please follow us on Twitter @SimplifyPod. We'll see you next time.
Hail to Pitt.
Let's go, O's.